Chapter 329. Those men and women sneered in their hearts because of Lin Sun's power, but they didn't dare to say much. Lin Sun didn't need to guess what these guys were thinking, but he didn't want to explain more. What he said tonight was not for them at all. They were just a group of playboys. Lin Sun didn't want to prove his existence in front of them. He just wanted to spread the news that he took over heart-cleansing Peak through the mouths of these Lin family's disciples. Let all the other clansmen of Lin family know about it. Lin Sun would like to see how many people would jump out to oppose him at that time. Before long, Lin Zhong came back and saw the figures kneeling on the ground. He couldn't help but look worried, but he didn't say anything in the end. He had seen that this young master was not an impetuous person. He might do this to establish his prestige or have other profound meaning, but it was definitely not a reckless move. Tonight is the first time I step into heart-cleansing Peak. I won't embarrass you. I'll let you go now. However, if you want to come to heart-cleansing Peak in the future, you have to get my consent first. Lin Sun waved his hand and turned into the hall. Those men and women couldn't believe that Lin Sun would let them go so easily. Until they saw Lin Sun's figure disappear in the depths of Heart-Cleansing Hall, they finally dared to be sure that it was true. Let's go. Those men and women got up and hurried away with hatred. They were going to tell the elders of their clan what happened tonight. How dare a 10-year-old brat threaten to take charge of Heart-Cleansing Peak? He must be tired of living. When they came to the bottom of Heart-Cleansing Peak, a man suddenly asked, "Lin Zhong, who is that boy?" As soon as this question came out, others suddenly reacted. Yes, they still didn't know the real identity of Lin Sun at this time. It was not their fault. Lin Sun didn't care about them before. He simply and rudely beat them, which made these men and women confused. How could they think about other things? Young masters and ladies, that is Lin Sun, the son of my master Lin Wenjing and his mother Luo Qingxuan. Lin Zhong said with a touch of pride. What? Lin Wenjing's son? Wasn't he dead when he was born? Lin Zhong, are you fucking kidding me? No wonder he looks familiar to me. I always feel that I have seen him somewhere. Those men and women were in an uproar, all of them shocked by this news. They continued to ask Lin Zhong and repeatedly confirmed that Lin Zhong was Lin Wenjing's son from beginning to end. This caused all of them to have a bad feeling in their hearts. If they planned to go back and complain to their elders in order to retaliate against Lin Sun, at this moment, they really realized that the situation was a little serious. He must report this matter to the elders of the clan immediately. Soon, those men and women left in a hurry. The hall was in a mess, and the air was still suffused with the pungent smell of alcohol. Sitting alone in a chair, Lin Sun's eyes wandered and his expression was blank, as if he had a lot on his mind. From the moment he found out about his past, he should have been happy, but the truth was that he couldn't feel happy at all. The events of the past were too complicated. In that bloody massacre, his father, Lin Wenjing, was killed, his mother, Luo Qingxuan, disappeared, and even none of their immediate relatives survived. The murderer was a person called Yun Qinbai. He only knew that he came from a mysterious orthodoxy called the Heavenly Sword sect. In addition, there were no other clues. If that was all, it would be fine. But the reality was cruel. Because of this bloody incident, the leaderless Lin family fell into a situation of internal and external troubles. In the end, Lin family was taken advantage of by many top forces, and its forces and industries were divided up. Lin family completely declined and declined. Originally, all this had nothing to do with Lin Sun. But the moment he stepped into the Forbidden City, Lin Sun knew that as the son of Lin Wenjing, he had to bear some things whether he wanted to or not. It was easy to say, but when he really did it, he would find it difficult and complicated, which made Lin Sun feel that he didn't know where to start. He had never experienced such a thing. He suddenly became a lineal descendant of Lin family in the Forbidden City from a young boy who came out of the mine prison, and then he was qualified to take over Heart-Cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats. It was indeed difficult for Lin Sun to adapt to his new identity after such a change. It was like a beggar on the street was suddenly recognized as the emperor's own son one day. No one could adapt to the strong contrast quickly. Of course, Lin Sun's encounter was like a gorgeous counterattack for many poor people in the world. He didn't need to struggle at all. He suddenly became a lineal descendant of an aristocratic family. Who wouldn't envy him? No matter how much the Lin clan had declined, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Just the identity of a descendant of a great clan was not something that could be easily obtained. Luo Qingxuan was so outstanding that she won the first place in the nation test. But when she wanted to be with Lin Wenjing, she was unanimously opposed by all the clansmen of Lin family. Why? It was very simple. Because Luo Qingxuan was born at the bottom of the poor family, she was considered not qualified to be with Lin Wenjing. However, only Lin Sun himself knew how embarrassing and unbearable the situation of the heir of Lin family was, and there were countless dangers hidden in it. If possible, he would rather not be a member of Lin family. Glorious identity? Who knew how many enemies were staring at him in the dark? Rising to the sky in a single bound? What a joke! Those clansmen of Lin family would not allow him to take over heart-cleansing peak smoothly. How could he rise to the sky in a single bound? It could be said that the dangers and difficulties Lin Sun, who was alone, had to face were absolutely beyond imagination if he wanted to bear the responsibility on his shoulders. If he was not careful, he might end up being smashed to pieces. The empty and desolate hall was a mess. A 15-year-old youth sat in a chair, lost in thought, deep in thought. When you enter the Forbidden City, you can turn the world upside down. In his mind, the letter with a cluster of xiao flower and the line of words on the letter flashed inadvertently. Then, he thought of the mysterious big shot in the palace. Inexplicably, Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with a glimmer of light. Now in the Forbidden City, many people mistakenly think that you have a lot to do with Heiyao Shrine. In this case, it's okay to let them continue to misunderstand. Soon, Lin Sun remembered the words of the old man of Heiyao Shrine, and a smile appeared on his lips inadvertently. No matter how dangerous it is, from today on, I will make a mess in front of you, Lin Sun murmured in his heart. The original confused and depressed mood had been replaced by a decisive and firm will. It didn't take long for the old servant Lin Zhong to return. Lin Sun invited him to sit down and said, "Granddad Zhong, tell me about the situation of Lin family." Lin Zhong seemed to have prepared for it. He was not surprised. After thinking for a while, he began to speak. Lin Sun knew that Lin family was also a superior aristocratic family in the Forbidden City of the Empire 500 years ago, which was on par with the well-known 7 superior aristocratic families. The criterion to judge an aristocratic family was very simple. There was only one thing, that was, whether there was a life-death realm king in the family. At that time, an ancestor of Lin family named Lin Daochen was a famous life-death realm king in the empire. But later, Lin Daochen unfortunately died in the battlefield and was defeated by a terrible king in the Empire of the Dark. Since then, Lin family suffered a great loss of vitality and fell from the ranks of superior aristocratic families to the ranks of medium aristocratic families. The most embarrassing thing was that there had been no life-death realm king in hundreds of years. But even so, the power possessed by Lin family was not comparable to that of ordinary medium aristocratic families. It could be regarded as a top force second only to the 7 superior aristocratic families. This situation lasted for hundreds of years, but it was peaceful. Although the power of Lin family did not return to the ranks of superior aristocratic families, it did not decline again. Until the bloody event that happened in Lin family 15 years ago, which completely changed the power of Lin family. Almost all the immediate relatives of Lin fighting, the patriarch, were killed. Without a leader, the power of Lin family was mercilessly divided by many powerful families and fell to the bottom. Now, the power owned by Lin family could barely be classified as inferior aristocratic families, not even medium aristocratic families. Hearing this, Lin Sun could not help but feel disappointed. 500 years ago, Lin family was still a superior aristocratic family with great power and a life-death realm king. 500 years later, it had declined to the point where it could barely be classified as an inferior aristocratic family. It could be said that it had plummeted and lost its glory. Compared with the other 7 aristocratic families, Lin family indeed fell too fast. Soon, Lin Sun calmed down and asked, "Granddad Zhong, what's the situation of Lin family now?" Lin Zhong's voice was low as he was immersed in his memories. His expression carried a wisp of sorrow as he said, "After the bloody incident all those years ago, the patriarch's bloodline was almost completely annihilated, and only the other 4 collateral branches were left. It turned out that there were 5 branches of Lin family. Among them, the branch of Lin Fighting, Lin Sun's grandfather, was the direct descendant and had always firmly controlled the power of the family. In addition, the other 4 branches were the descendants of Lin Fighting's 4 younger brothers, as well as many in-laws and distant relatives. This was what a large clan was like. They had many relatives, direct relatives, collateral relatives, in-laws, and so on. There were countless of them. After the bloody incident, the 4 branches of Lin family moved away from Heart-Cleansing Peak and settled in other areas of the Forbidden City. Nominally, they were still members of Lin family, but in fact, they had been completely divided into 4 forces, each of which did its own thing. Hearing this, Lin Sun frowned. He keenly grasped a key problem and said, "In those days, the 4 branches did not hesitate to cooperate with the enemy to divide the foundation of Lin family in order to fight for power and profit. How could people like them be willing to move away from Heart-Cleansing Peak?" Heart-Cleansing Peak. This was one of the 72 peaks of aristocratic families, which represented the supreme glory and status of an aristocratic family. Who would be willing to give up such a treasure land and look for a new place to settle? Chapter 330. Lin Zhong said proudly, "Young master, apart from you, no one else in Lin family is qualified to occupy Heart-Cleansing Peak." Soon, Lin Sun understood that this was the special care from the imperial family. Hundreds of years ago, Lin Daochen, the ancestor of Lin family, fought for the empire. Although he died in the end, he helped the empire to resolve a terrible disaster. Therefore, the imperial family personally issued the emperor's decree and granted the ownership of Heart-Cleansing Peak to the lineal descendants of Lin Daochen. Lin Fighting, Lin Daochen's grandfather, was the eldest son of Lin Daochen, and his father, Lin Wenjing, was the eldest grandson of Lin Daochen. In terms of seniority, Lin Sun was the lineal great-grandson of Lin Daochen. In the bloody event more than 10 years ago, almost all the lineal descendants of Lin Daochen were killed. Therefore, according to the decree of that year, Lin Sun became the only qualified candidate to own Heart-Cleansing Peak. As for other branches of Lin family, they had to move out of Heart-Cleansing Peak even if they didn't want to because they didn't have such qualifications. According to common sense, almost all the lineal descendants of Lin Daochen had died. Even Lin Sun, a baby in swaddling clothes, was considered impossible to survive. Heart-Cleansing Peak should be taken away. It was strange that the imperial family didn't make this decision, so Heart-Cleansing Peak had not been taken away to this day. Did they know that I didn't die? Lin Sun was surprised. Lin Zhong had been guarding Heart-Cleansing Peak for years. He was also very confused. Hearing Lin Sun's question, he couldn't help but say, "It's possible. In these years, I often worry that Heart-Cleansing Peak will be taken away suddenly. But until you come back today, such a thing has never happened. In this way, the imperial family seems to have expected that you will return one day." Lin Sun suddenly thought of the big shot in the depths of the imperial palace. Could it be him? Soon, Lin Sun shook his head. This problem was not important at present. What was important was that heart-cleansing peak still belonged to Lin family, which was enough. Grandad Zhong, I want to ask you something. Lin Sun's expression became solemn. Lin Zhong immediately sat up straight and said, Young master, feel free to speak your mind. This old servant will definitely tell you everything I know without reserve. Lin Sun leaned forward slightly and stared at Lin Zhong with deep black eyes. If I want to restore Lin family, where do you think I should start? Lin Zhong was shocked in his heart. He seemed to be a little excited, but he soon calmed down and said bitterly, Young master, there are only you and me on heart-cleansing peak now. It's almost impossible to do this. He knew the current situation of Lin family better than Lin Sun. Even if Lin Sun was the only descendant who was qualified to inherit heart-cleansing peak, he was too young. He was only in his teens, and he was alone. How could he restore Lin family? Lin family and Lin family, and the other 4 branches of family, Lin family, they were not from Lin family. On the contrary, Lin Zhong was even sure that when those clansmen learned that Lin Sun wanted to take charge of heart-cleansing peak and sit on the throne of patriarch, they would not give up. He knew those collateral family members too well. After the bloody incident that year, in order to fight for power, they didn't hesitate to collude with foreign enemies, causing the Lin family to sink into internal strife. The influence and property that the Lin family originally possessed were also completely divided up. How could such clansmen watch Lin Sun take charge of heart-cleansing peak? What's more, many powerful forces who divided up Lin family's industry in those days would not watch Lin Sun grow. Internal troubles. Foreign troubles. In addition, Lin Sun was young, alone and weak. It was more difficult for him to lead the whole Lin family than to ascend to heaven. In an instant, Lin Sun knew that Lin Zhong didn't want to hit him, but thought that he didn't have the ability to take charge of Lin family at present. This made Lin Sun frown and remain silent. He knew very well that he was currently short of manpower, money, and strong capital to be able to stand on his own. It was indeed difficult to restore the Lin family. However, since he came back, how could he be indifferent? He was not afraid of difficulties, but he was afraid of admitting defeat. Now Lin family was declining, the situation was dangerous, and the situation was unbearable. As long as he did it step by step, there would be hope to reverse the situation and rise again. If he didn't do it, he might as well get out of the Forbidden City at once. Of course, according to Lin Sun's character, he would not admit defeat. Grandad Zhong, whether you believe it or not, tell me what to do first. If I do it, I may lose, but if I don't do it, I will regret it for the rest of my life. Lin Sun's eyes were firm. Lin Zhong's expression changed. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and said, Well, I've been struggling at death's door for more than 10 years. If I didn't want heart-cleansing peak left by the patriarch to be occupied by others, I would have died long ago. Since young master wants to take a gamble, then this old servant will go all out with these old bones of mine and fight it out with you. His voice was sonorous. Lin Sun immediately smiled and patted Lin Zhong on the shoulder, saying, Don't worry, Grandad Zhong. Although I'm alone, I haven't met any problem that I can't solve. Young master, the first thing you need to do now is to have a comprehensive understanding of the current situation of our Lin family. Only by solving the internal problems can we gather the strength of the clan to fight against the foreign enemies. This was Lin Zhong's suggestion. Lin Sun thought for a while and nodded secretly. What he said was true. It was true that he had encountered a lot of problems when he just entered the Forbidden City, but the real problem was to solve the internal problems of the clan first. As long as he solved the internal problems, he would stabilize his foundation and stand firm. If he wanted to avenge his parents and relatives without a stable foundation, it would be wishful thinking. In order to further understand the current situation of Lin family, Lin Zhong left Heart Cleansing Hall with Lin Sun. Back Mountain of Heart Cleansing Peak. Sutras Pavilion. The 7-story ancient building was bathed in silver starlight. This was the place where Lin family stored ancient books. It was the core forbidden area of the clan. In the 7-story building, Lin family collected thousands of years of cultivation method. At that time, Lin family was one of the top aristocratic families with great power. It could be imagined how amazing the ancient books it inherited were. The scripture pavilion could also show how powerful a clan's foundation was. But when Lin soon entered under the leadership of Lin Zhong, he found that rows of bookshelves were scattered on the ground, covered with cobwebs and dust. It was like being ransacked by a group of robbers. Not to mention the ancient books, even a piece of paper could not be found. Young Master, the Sutras Pavilion is divided into 7 floors. It was built by the ancestors of Lin family with painstaking effort. The ancient books collected here were as vast as the sea. Lin Zhong's voice was low, and he glanced at the empty hall covered with cobwebs and dust with a complicated look. There are more than 3,000 ancient books on cultivation and more than 1,900 secret fighting skills on the 1st floor alone. But after the bloody incident back then, these priceless books were all taken away. Lin Zhong's voice was bitter, full of loneliness and sadness. Lin soon glanced around for a long time in a daze. He didn't speak, but clenched his hands unconsciously. Then Lin Zhong led Lin Sun to the 2nd floor of the Sutras Pavilion. Young Master, there are 1,600 ancient books on cultivation and more than 700 secret fighting skills on the 2nd floor. On the 2nd floor, rows of bookshelves also collapse. Dust and cobwebs could be seen everywhere. In some places, there were still traces of fighting and blood stains. It was a mess. Let's go to the 3rd floor. Lin Sun stood silently for a long time. He took a deep breath and withdrew his gaze. Next, Lin Zhong led Lin Sun up floor by floor. Without exception, they were all empty and dilapidated. When they came to the top floor, Lin Zhong's expression became extremely lonely and sad. His emotions fluctuated violently, and he seemed to be about to collapse. There were only a few rows of bookshelves here. But this was the first-class forbidden area in the Sutras Pavilion. In those days, no one except the core members of Lin family was qualified to set foot here. Young Master, what is hidden here are the most precious secret books of Lin family. There are 7 of them. In addition, there are 54 volumes of cultivation experience left by our ancestors. The real core inheritance is recorded in those books. When he finished this paragraph, Lin Zhong seemed to have lost all his strength and looked extremely gloomy. Lin Sun stood there, and he almost couldn't bear the boiling anger in his heart. In a trance, he seemed to see group after group of enemies from all those years ago, carrying boundless greed and ecstasy as they wantonly plundered the scripture depository. Those were the ancient books collected by the ancestors of Lin family with great efforts. They were the foundation of Lin family. But now they were all looted. Crack, crack. Lin Sun clenched his hands into fists. His knuckles made a crisp sound because of the force, and the blue veins on the back of his hands burst. However, Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it. There seemed to be a vortex surging in the depths of his black eyes, burning with terrible flames. After a long time, Lin Sun suddenly withdrew his gaze and strode down the golden pavilion. He dared not to look at it anymore. He was worried that he couldn't control his anger. A cultivation treasure house built by the ancestors of Lin family was completely destroyed because of that bloody incident. Even an outsider would feel deeply sorry to see such a scene, let alone Lin Sun, a lineal descendant of Lin family. Grandad Zhong, do you know who were the ones who took these books back then? Yes. Good. Write them down for me one by one. Don't miss any. Young Master, rest assured. I won't forget those murderers even if I die. Walking out of the Sutras Pavilion, Lin Sun took a deep breath and began to tell Lin Zhong something. Speaking of this, he suddenly thought of one thing and asked, were there clansmen of the other 4 branches who looted the Sutras Pavilion? Lin Zhong was stiff all over and his expression changed. There was no need to ask again. Lin Sun already knew the answer. His eyes suddenly became cold, but he chuckled and said, "Good, very good." That smile was colder and emotionless than his eyes. Chapter 331. Next, Lin Zhong led Lin Sun along the back mountain and came to another forbidden place of Lin family, Treasure House. The treasure house was divided into 5 layers. There were tens of thousands of spiritual weapons, ranging from the lowest level of human rank to the top of heaven rank. Among them were different weapons such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks and forks, as well as armors, shoulder guards, wrist guards, boots, heart protectors and so on. There were even spiritual weapons such as short crossbows, artillery crossbows, warships and so on. But now, this place was completely empty. When Lin Sun walked out of the treasure house, his face remained unchanged, but his whole body was full of terrible killing intent. He couldn't control it at all. Think about it, how amazing the value of the spiritual treasures stored by a top force that once ranked among the top forces of the empire. But now all of them were looted. If Lin Sun's state of mind hadn't been as firm as a rock, he would have vomited blood and died of anger. If the ancestors of Lin family saw this scene, they would not rest in peace. After leaving the treasure house, Lin Sun was taken to the core forbidden places of Lin family, such as Pill Depository, Animal Pond, Spiritual Medicine Garden, and so on. In the end, without exception, all the valuable treasures within them were completely swept clean. In the end, when Lin Sun returned to Heart Cleansing Hall, he sat alone in complete silence, motionless like a sculpture, as if he had no emotion. Outside the window, the stars were shining and the moon was hanging high. It was extraordinarily quiet. But the young man sitting alone in the hall was in a turbulent state of mind. His emotions were turbulent and didn't calm down for a long time. He could predict that Lin family had declined to the extreme, but he didn't expect that such a big heart-cleansing peak would be looted like this. There were only a bunch of empty houses and furnishings left. There was nothing valuable. This was the situation Lin Sun was facing now. Lin Zhong stood on one side of the hall and looked at Lin Sun worriedly, lest Lin Sun couldn't bear the blow and collapsed completely. It was reasonable that such a big heart-cleansing peak seemed to be one of the 72 peaks of aristocratic families. But who could imagine that this place, which represented supreme glory, was just an empty shell now? A quarter of an hour, half an hour, 1 incense stick's worth of time. As time went by, Lin Sun remained silent, which made Lin Zhong more and more worried. He suddenly regretted telling Lin Sun all this tonight. After all, the young master was only a teenager. He was still too young. How could he bear such a cruel blow when he suddenly found out that he was about to inherit such a mess? Young master, Lin Zhong took a deep breath and tried to comfort Lin. If you really can't do it, let's give up. As long as you're alive, it's more important than anything else. At this moment, Lin Sun, who was like a clay statue, finally reacted. He raised his head and looked at Lin Zhong. His lips curled into a smile that was hard to understand. He said softly, "Grandad Zhong, I can't go on anymore. If I give up now, it will be crueler than killing me." After a pause, he stood up and looked at the vast night outside the hall, saying, "When I entered the Forbidden City, someone told me that I could turn the world upside down. At that time, I wondered why he said that. Now I finally understand that if I don't make a scene, the Lin family will have no hope of coming back to life." At the end of his words, there was a touch of coldness in his voice. Lin Zhong was shocked. Looking at the young man in the distance, he suddenly felt inexplicable peace of mind, as if he saw the shadow of his master when he was young in order to marry the mistress of the Lin family. His master was also resolute under the opposition of all the clansmen. Although there were thousands of people, he still went forward. Heart Cleansing Hall was very large and divided into 3 floors. The first floor was the hall for holding clan meetings. The second floor was the study room specially set up for the patriarch to deal with clan affairs. The third floor was the quiet room for the patriarch to practice. Before long, Lin Sun sat in front of the empty desk, playing with a crystal-clear purple jade seal in his hand. The jade seal was engraved with 2 words, heart cleansing. It was made of some unknown material, and it was filled with a mysterious and obscure atmosphere. Heart-cleansing jade seal was the key to Master Heart-cleansing Peak. Only by controlling it could the passage on Heart-cleansing Peak be opened. In other words, if Lin Sun didn't want to, as long as the passage was closed, no one could enter Heart-cleansing Peak unless he broke in by force. However, as one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats, anyone who wanted to break in by force had to think about the consequences. This thing was originally kept by Lin Zhong, but now it was given to Lin Sun, which meant that from now on, at least Lin Sun had the right to enter and exit Heart-cleansing Peak, regardless of the power of the clan. However, in Lin Sun's view, this thing couldn't play any role in solving his internal problems in the future. The key was to be strong himself. Thinking of this, Lin Sun put away Heart-cleansing jade pendant and took out a simple silver hairpin. This was given by Shu Sanqi, the chief instructor, when he left Bloodthirsty Camp. He told Lin Sun that if he had a chance to enter the Forbidden City, he could take this thing to a place called Vulture House when he was in trouble. The owner of Vulture House would help Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't intend to accept it at first, but Shu Sanqi's words changed his mind. Young Ku is also there. Don't you want to see your instructor again in the future? At this time, playing with the silver hairpin in his hand, Lin Sun thought of instructor Young Ku, who was delicate but cold as snow. The next morning, Lin Sun, who didn't sleep all night, got up and walked out of Heart-cleansing Hall. The rising sun was like a fantasy, sprinkling golden luster, dyeing the sea of clouds bright. The whole Heart-cleansing Peak was bathed in a sacred atmosphere. Looking from the top of the mountain, the golden morning light and purple clouds blended in the distance, which was magnificent and brilliant. The grand atmosphere between heaven and earth refreshed Lin Sun's spirit. This was Heart-cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of the aristocratic family. It stood above the void of the Forbidden City, the capital of the empire. Only the most powerful aristocratic family of the empire could occupy this place and overlook the mountains and rivers. Young master, don't you need me to accompany you? No, Grandad Zhong. When I come back, please put the list of all the treasures that were plundered in advance in the study. Don't worry, young master. Lin Sun said goodbye to Lin Zhong and walked down Heart-cleansing Peak alone. On the way to the bottom of the peak, there were many chariots pulled by snow-maned deer. But after the bloody things happened that year, even the snow-maned deer were taken away. Lin Sun always had an unspeakable hatred in his heart whenever he thought of this kind of looting. Buzz at the bottom of the peak, with the opening of the spiritual formation, an invisible door emerged. A white jade staircase swept out like a rainbow and connected to the ground below the 300 meters. As soon as Lin Sun walked out, he stood there. Because there were already people waiting there on the ground. It was a group of young people, men and women, all dressed in brocade and expensive clothes. At first glance, Lin Sun knew that they were not ordinary children. Obviously, they had been waiting here for a long time. At this time, they all looked impatient and were cursing something. When they saw Lin Sun, they were all refreshed and looked at Lin Sun. When they saw that Lin Sun was just a teenager, someone immediately made a disdainful sound. Lin Wenxiu, is this young boy the fierce man you said? Tut tut, I didn't expect that you were defeated by him. Yu Jiao, don't be angry. No matter who he is, since he dared to beat you, I must cut off one of his arms. Lin Sun noticed that in the crowd, there were several young people he met last night. At this time, they all looked at him with resentment. Did they come to seek revenge? When this idea flashed through his mind, Lin Sun denied it because he saw that although those young people shouted fiercely, no one dared to fight. It was not because they were afraid of him, but because of a man in yellow in front of them. The man was tall, with sword-like eyebrows and sharp eyes. He stood there casually with a kind of arrogant and oppressive momentum. Heaven Gang Realm. In an instant, Lin soon judged the strength of the man from his breath. It was generally clear that the man in yellow should be an outstanding child of a collateral branch of Lin family. Yu Jiao, is he the Lin Sun you mentioned? The man in yellow stared at Lin Sun coldly. Although his voice was calm, his momentum was aggressive. Cousin Ingjin, it's him. Lin Yujiao clenched her teeth and her eyes were full of resentment. Her pretty face was still red and swollen and covered by a piece of gauze, but the bruises at the corners of her eyes could not be covered. I see. You can go back now. The man in yellow gave an order and strode forward to the bottom of the white jade stairs. He looked up at Lin Sun at the end of the stairs. I'm Lin Ingjin from Westbrook Lin. I heard that you threatened to occupy Heart Cleansing Peak? Lin Ingjin. Westbrook Lin. In an instant, Lin Sun remembered Lin Zhong's words last night. It turned out that after the 4 collateral branches of Lin family moved out, they were divided into 4 branches, namely Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin, Flying Peak Lin, and Northlight Lin. Each of them was entrenched in different areas of the Forbidden City, just like 4 independent Lin clans. The relationship between them was complicated. Some of them hated each other, but also cooperated with each other. All of this was caused by the internal strife within the clan after the bloody incident all those years ago. Lin Ingjin came from Westbrook Lin, which meant that he was the descendant of Lin Sun's second grandfather, Lin Sisi. However, Lin Sun didn't want to recognize his relatives at all. Seeing that the man was looking for trouble, he didn't bother to be polite. You're wrong. Lin Sun smiled and said, It's not a threat to occupy Heart Cleansing Peak, but a fact. From now on, no cat or dog can enter and exit Heart Cleansing Peak at will. A cat or dog. Hearing this, many young people's faces changed and they cursed one after another. This guy was so rampant and reckless. Lin Ingjin's face also sank. He waved his hand to stop people scolding. He stared at Lin Sun like a knife. You're so arrogant. I don't know why you dare to say that. But I still have to advise you not to make mistakes. Heart Cleansing Peak is not qualified for you. Chapter 332. Seeing that Lin Ingjin was so powerful, the young people who followed him were all excited. Lin Ingjin was one of the best in the younger generation of Westbrook Lins. When he broke through to Human Gang Realm, he condensed the second-class pond of spiritual power, swamp of wind and earth. This made his cultivation speed far faster than ordinary people. As early as 3 years ago, he had broken through to Heaven Gang Realm. It was said that Lin Ingjin already had the foundation to break through to Sea Spirit Realm. The reason why he suppressed his realm was that he could lay a solid foundation for cultivation when he broke through in the future, so that he could have a longer road of cultivation. For practitioners in the world, it was a great problem whether they could step into Sea Spirit Realm or not. But for Lin Ingjin, it was obviously not a problem. In short, in the hearts of people, Lin Ingjin was the pride of the younger generation of Westbrook Lins, with outstanding talent and outstanding strength. Now, he showed up with a domineering attitude. How could those young people not be excited? Some people even worried that Lin Sun would be scared by Lin Ingjin's tough attitude. If he took the initiative to admit defeat, it would be too disappointing. Lin Sun said with a smile, "Cut the crap. Since you're here to pick a fight, it proves that you're ready to be beaten. Then don't be polite and come at me. After I get rid of you, I have to hurry to do something. I don't have much time to waste with you." His words were casual, but those young people couldn't believe their ears. They all opened their eyes wide. This guy was so damn arrogant. Brother Ingjin beat him. Damn it, this guy's mouth is so poisonous. We must kill him. You are so reckless. Trouble comes from a loose tongue. Those young people shouted angrily. Lin Ingjin was also slightly stunned. He had seen arrogant people, but he had never seen such an arrogant one. He couldn't help but look gloomy, and his eyes burst with sharp and frightening light. My friend, based on your words, today you are so long-winded. Lin Sun rolled his eyes and frowned. Are you a woman? Lin Yingzhen was so angry that he almost coughed up blood. As a descendant of an aristocratic family, the most important thing was etiquette and demeanor. But he had never seen such an unforgiving person like Lin Sun. Clang! But at this time, Lin Sun seemed to have lost his patience. He pulled out his flowing light saber and chopped down from the white jade step. He didn't hesitate at all when he made his move. This is too much. Lin Yingzhen was completely angry. His whole body surged with terrible momentum. He was like an unsheathed sword, and his killing intent soared to the sky. In his hand, a spiritual sword swept out with a touch of burning red luster. But at the moment when Lin Sun attacked, Lin Yingzhen's eyes suddenly narrowed. Lin Sun's simple saber seemed to be nothing special, but it made him feel that it was unstoppable and unavoidable. What kind of saber technique was this? Lin Yingzhen was shocked and suddenly felt that something was wrong. There was an unparalleled momentum in the saber light, which was like a raging storm that could tear everything in the universe. This Lin Yingzhen was horrified. The anger and contempt in his heart all disappeared and were replaced by a deadly cold and dangerous atmosphere. At this critical moment, he almost subconsciously exerted all his strength, not to attack but to defend. This scene seemed a little strange in the eyes of those young people. They thought that Lin Yingzhen could easily kill Lin Sun with one sword strike. But they never thought that Lin Yingzhen's sword strike was used to defend his whole body defense? How could it be possible to defend before the fight started? Everyone was stunned. Immediately after, their vision blurred, and they heard a loud bang. Spiritual light shot out, and the force wreaked havoc. It was as if two mountains had collided. Then, Lin Yingzhen, who was highly respected by them, flew out like a kite with a broken line as if he was hit by a wild ox. With a puff, the smoke and dust on the ground scattered. Lin Yingzhen screamed and coughed up blood. Many bones in his body were broken. He was in so much pain that he couldn't stand up. Hiss! All the people present gasped and were dumbfounded. Did they see it wrong? Just at the beginning of the fight, Lin Yingzhen was sent out by a saber strike? It was horrible. This was beyond everyone's imagination. They couldn't help being stunned and completely shocked. But Lin Sun was also a little surprised at this time. You have a good reaction. You are lucky to be able to block my strike. Hearing this, many people shivered all over and looked horrified. They finally realized that the handsome young man in front of them was a tough guy. With the cultivation of Earthgang realm, he killed Lin Yingzhen, who was in Heavengang realm, with one strike, and it was obvious that he was very relaxed and didn't use his full strength at all. This was too appalling. Lin Yingzhen's face was livid. He was lying on the ground and coughing up blood. His eyes were full of disbelief. He couldn't imagine how he was defeated so quickly. At this time, Lin Sun had already walked down the step. Wherever he passed, those young people were scared to avoid him as if they were avoiding snakes and scorpions. Obviously, they were frightened by Lin Sun's strike just now. Lin Sun walked to Lin Yingzhen and quickly took all the valuable things from Lin Yingzhen's body, including the jade belt, boots, and inner armor. Lin Yingzhen kept screaming in horror, like a virgin girl being ravaged. His face was full of helplessness. In the blink of an eye, Lin Yingzhen had only a pair of underpants left, revealing his white naked body. He was clean all over. The group of young people were stunned. It was not that they didn't want to help him, but Lin Sun moved so fast that Lin Yingzhen was about to become a naked man when they reacted. The most important thing was that even Lin Yingzhen had no resistance under Lin Sun's hands. If it was them, it was like hitting a stone with an egg. After taking all the valuable things, Lin Sun stopped. He ignored Lin Yingzhen, who was lying on the ground covering his face and screaming. Lin Sun looked at the group of young people. Just a glance made those young people feel cold all over, as if they were stared at by a hungry wolf. The men's faces changed, and the women's faces turned pale. They were afraid to repeat Lin Yingzhen's mistakes. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh in his heart. These guys were really cowards. They didn't know how to fight back, so that Lin soon couldn't find a chance to plunder some treasures. Everyone, go back and tell your elders that it's useless to test me. I won't care about you this time, but if you dare to provoke me next time, don't blame me for being rude. Lin soon glanced at the crowd, showed a warm smile, and turned away. Of course, he knew that this was a test. Obviously, he wanted Lin Yingxian to feel his trump card. This proved that the 4 branches of Lin family should now know that he was back. Maybe they heard some news, so they didn't dare to come rashly, so they sent Lin Yingxian to test him. Unfortunately, Lin soon didn't welcome this kind of test at all. Even in his opinion, this kind of test undoubtedly proved that the 4 branches didn't put him in their eyes at all. Lin Yingxian's miserable end was Lin soon's counterattack. He was so unceremonious and powerful that he wanted to let the 4 branches know that Lin soon was determined to control heart-cleansing peak. Watching Lin soon leave, those young people couldn't help changing their expressions. No one dared to stop him. They even secretly felt lucky that Lin soon didn't make trouble for them. What happened just now was too frightening. Lin soon not only defeated Lin Yingxian with 1 saber, but also stripped Lin Yingxian from head to toe, leaving only a colorful underpants. It was too humiliating. From now on, Lin Yingxian would become a laughing stock of Westbrook Lin. If he wanted to raise his head, he had to kill Lin soon. Damn it! Damn it! At this time, Lin Yingxian was so ashamed and angry that he wanted to die. He roared again and again. It was so shameful and shameful. What Lin soon did was even worse than killing him. He was so angry that he rolled his eyes and fainted. Seeing this, those young people immediately rushed to Lin soon without thinking much. After solving Lin Yingxian's provocation, Lin soon didn't care about it anymore. He walked along the spacious street into the Forbidden City in the morning. Yesterday, he arrived at the Forbidden City at night. He took the chariot all the way and entered Heart-Cleansing Peak before he had time to appreciate the scenery of the Forbidden City. But now, as he walked alone and strolled along the street, he saw the orderly and spacious streets were crowded with people and carriages. Most of them were cultivators, and it was rare to see ordinary people. This was normal. This was the Forbidden City, an important place in the capital. It was one of the most sacred places in the hearts of countless practitioners. It was extremely difficult for practitioners to take root here, let alone ordinary people. Rumble in the sky, the purple air was steaming and the morning light was spreading. Spiritual shuttles passed by, making a rumbling sound, which was very spectacular. In the Forbidden City, except for spiritual shuttles, it was forbidden for any practitioner or bird to fly in the sky. Therefore, Lin soon could see spirit realm practitioners with high status in the outside world almost at any time along the way. They were either walking or riding chariots like him. There were even some strong practitioners of Tao Insight Realm. As for practitioners of Human Gang Realm, Earth Gang Realm, Heaven Gang Realm, and so on, they could be seen everywhere. Of course, the practitioners within the 9th level of the martial realm were the most common. There were so many of them that it was quite a spectacular sight. In addition to practitioners, Lin soon also saw many foreigners in strange clothes. For example, monks of Baoxiang country, warriors of Yunlan country, and so on. There were even strong voodoo barbarians from the Empire of the Dark. This made Lin soon's pupils shrink, but he soon understood from the conversation of nearby practitioners that those voodoo barbarians were foreign envoys. They lived in the Forbidden City all year round and were not in danger. Witnessing all these bizarre and spectacular things, Lin soon couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This was the Forbidden City. It was the heart of Xiao Empire, where there were many clans and forces. It was the center of the empire's power. When it came to prosperity and heritage, there was no one in the world who could match it. Chapter 333. After wandering for an hour, Lin soon learned the address of the Vulture House after a little inquiry. Then he spent a piece of gold coin to hire a chariot and drove to the Vulture House. A piece of gold coin was enough to hire 7 or 8 chariots in other cities. It could be seen from this that the price of goods in the Forbidden City was very high. Without enough wealth, it was really difficult to establish a foothold here. In the northwest area of the Forbidden City, this was the civilian area at the root of the Imperial City. Almost all the people living here were practitioners from all over the world. In terms of prosperity, it couldn't be compared with other areas of the Forbidden City. But even so, this area was very lively, with restaurants, inns, businesses, brothels, everything that one could expect. The Vulture House was one of the restaurants in this area. Its location was very remote. Lin soon got off the chariot and searched in this area for a long time before he found it in the corner of a street. It was a 2-story building that looked ordinary and inconspicuous. It was almost noon, and there were only a dozen or so guests in the Vulture House. The business seemed to be a little quiet. Is the friend mentioned by Drillmaster Shu Sanchi the owner of this restaurant? Lin soon raised his head and looked at the sign of the restaurant written with 3 ancient characters, Vulture House, with a touch of surprise in his eyes. He had thought that since the owner of the Vulture House was Shu Sanchi's friend, he must also be an incredible expert. Who would have thought that this so-called Vulture House was just an ordinary restaurant in the commoner's district? However, Lin soon didn't despise it at all. As the saying went, great hermits hid in the city. There were many powerful people in the world who were hiding in such an inconspicuous downtown. But when Lin soon was about to step into the Vulture House, there was a sudden burst of thunderous hoofbeats in the distant street. The earth shook as if thousands of troops were approaching. As soon as the hoofbeats sounded, Lin soon saw a group of practitioners riding fierce beasts roaring towards him. Crack! 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 On the mounts, those practitioners waved their long whips, cursed and whipped the pedestrians who stood in the way. They were extremely arrogant. Get out of the way! Damn it, you blind bastards, get out of here! If you don't want to die, get out of here! The pedestrians on the street screamed and dodged. It was a mess. A few people didn't have time to dodge and were sent flying by the ferocious beasts ridden by the practitioners. They screamed and fell to the ground. There were also some pedestrians who had clearly dodged, but those practitioners still brandished their long whips and lashed them, causing those people's skin to split open and flesh to lacerate, causing them to roll on the ground and cry in pain. Arrogant, disregarding life. This was Lin's first impression of this group of practitioners. Letting a beast run wildly in a busy city was no different from trampling on lives. What made people's hair stand on end was that, after doing such a wicked thing, those practitioners were incomparably complacent and kept laughing loudly. Suddenly, Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. Not far away from him, there was a little boy who seemed to be scared out of his wits. He stood there and cried, forgetting to dodge. Puff! The ferocious beast at the very front had already galloped over. The practitioner on it revealed a sinister smile as he swung his whip towards the little boy's head. If this attack landed, the little boy's head would definitely be crushed to death. There was a burst of exclamation in the street. Many people couldn't help but close their eyes and didn't dare to watch it any longer. They all knew that the poor and innocent little boy was going to die. At this critical moment, Lin Sun rushed out like lightning, reached out his hands to hold the little boy, and rushed to the roadside dangerously. However, the whip fell on Lin Sun's back, tearing the clothes on his back and leaving a bloody whip mark on his skin, making him feel a burning pain. The only fortunate thing was that the little boy was unscathed. He was just frightened and cried loudly. What? Suddenly, the leading practitioner glanced at Lin Sun with some surprise. Then he smiled disdainfully and withdrew his gaze, as if he didn't want to pay attention to Lin Sun. Rumble! At this time, the group of practitioners riding ferocious beasts all rushed over and stopped in front of Vulture House in an orderly manner. Behind this group of practitioners, there was a bronze chariot drawn by 4 black-scaled horses. Although there was no decoration on it, It revealed a ferocious and frightening momentum. Just by looking at the 4 ferocious black-scaled horses and the guards in front, Lin soon knew that the identity of the owner of the chariot must be extraordinary. Lin soon frowned. He first returned the child in his arms to his parent. Ignoring the bloody whip mark on his back, he raised his eyes and looked at the black chariot. In next to no time, a young man that wore a scarlet-red cloak and pitch-black armor walked down from the treasured carriage. He had a cold expression while his entire body was filled with a violent and iron-blooded aura that shook the hearts of all. The young man stepped out of the chariot and strode straight into Vulture House. Behind him, a group of guards followed him. "It's Chise again." On the street, someone said angrily, "In the past half a year, he has brought people to Vulture House every 3 or 5 days and made a mess. It's so abominable." "Hey, this guy's surname is not Chi because his sister married into Chi family. He was lucky enough to be given the surname Chi, otherwise, how could he be so powerful today?" Someone said disdainfully. "You're wrong. Although Chise was born in a poor family, his talent was very good. He joined the army when he was young. He fought on the battlefield for many years and made many military achievements. If not, it was impossible for him to have the surname of Chi family, only because of his sister's relationship. Anyway, this guy is too arrogant. Does he really think that he can do whatever he wants in the Forbidden City after changing his surname to Chi? Sooner or later, this kind of despicable person will be cleaned up by someone. Hey, although I also hope to see this scene, it's obvious that Chise can do whatever he wants in the Forbidden City only with the surname Chi. There was a lot of discussion in the street. The voices of hate, curse, envy and emotion sounded one after another. Chise. Lin Sun suddenly thought of Chi Tsangmei and Chi Tsangfeng. He also remembered the heavy encirclement and suppression operations he encountered on the way to the Forbidden City. Although the whip mark on his back didn't hurt his muscles and bones, it was so painful that Lin Sun couldn't help flashing a trace of coldness in his black eyes. He had killed many practitioners of Chi family along the way, but now he was whipped by a servant of a guy who changed his surname to Chi. How could Lin Sun not be angry? "Friend, why does Chise often come to Vulture House?" Lin Sun asked a pedestrian next to him in a low voice. "Hey, isn't it for the beauty in Vulture House?" The man sneered. "Chise is so shameless. It's obvious that the beauty has no interest in him, but he comes to pester her again and again. He has no character at all. He is really a bastard. Even if he changed his surname to Chi, he can't change his bad nature." "Beauty?" Lin Sun was stunned. "Bro, this is your first time here, right? Then you have no idea. About a year ago, the manager of the Vulture House, the old cripple, recruited a woman from God knows where. She is extremely beautiful and has a cold temperament, like an unapproachable iceberg. She immediately caused a sensation in the nearby streets and attracted many customers." That's right. That's right. The man showed a covetous and intoxicated look. "I've seen the beauty once. Her figure and face are so beautiful. If I can sleep with her for one night," Lin Sun frowned and interrupted, "but I don't think the business of Vulture House is good." "Why?" The man squinted at Lin Sun with slight dissatisfaction and said, "That's nonsense. In the past 6 months, Chise often came with his ferocious men. Who dares to patronize the business of Vulture House?" After that, he rolled his eyes and left. Lin Sun stood there alone and fell into thought. If he guessed right, the beauty, who had been pestered by Chise for more than half a year, should be Drillmaster Yongku. She was delicate and beautiful with a cold temperament. Wasn't that her? More than a year ago, it was the time when Drillmaster Yongku left the bloodthirsty camp. The time was also consistent. How dare Chise covet the beauty of Drillmaster Yongku? Isn't he afraid of being beaten to death? Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help shaking his head. No, if it was really Drillmaster Yongku, how could she be pestered by Chise for half a year without killing him? Bang bang bang. At this moment, there was a loud noise in the opposite vulture house. Immediately, more than a dozen diners were thrown out with screams. Get out of here! Don't you see my master is working? If I see you in vulture house again, I'll kill you without mercy. One of Chi Zai's attendants came out and scolded the diners, who fell to the ground with disdain. Lin Sun frowned, stepped forward to help a diner up and asked, "What happened inside?" The man screamed. Chi Zai was rejected by the iceberg beauty again. He was crazy all of a sudden. We were also affected. Lin Sun's heart tightened. He didn't dare to hesitate and rushed to Vulture House. He was not worried that young Ku would be bullied. He was worried that young Ku would be hated by Chi family if she bullied Chi Zai. Now Lin Sun knew clearly about the contradiction between the aristocratic families and the poor families at the bottom. Once such a thing happened, even if Chi Zai was unreasonable, he would inevitably harm young Ku in order to maintain the dignity of Chi family. Vulture House is closed today. Get out of here. In front of the door, 2 guards stood there. When they saw Lin Sun, they immediately scolded him. Coincidentally, one of the practitioners was the one who whipped Lin Sun just now. When he saw Lin Sun's face clearly, he immediately smiled grimly and said, "It's you, boy. Haven't you been whipped enough?" As he said, he raised the iron whip in his hand and was about to hit Lin Sun's head. Crack! But Lin Sun didn't retreat. Instead, he slapped the guy in the face. He screamed, his mouth and nose were bleeding, and his teeth were peeled off. His body turned around like a top. Finally, he knelt on the ground with stars in his eyes and almost fainted. Chapter 334. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun had grabbed the iron whip. Crack! The whip was unceremoniously lashed down. The strong wind contained the internal strength. The practitioner's skin and flesh were broken, and his internal organs were seriously injured. Finally, he convulsed and fainted. "You're courting death." The practitioner on the other side was furious. As soon as he raised his hand, he felt a horrible storm-like momentum suddenly burst out from Lin Sun. With a bang, the practitioner was shaken by Lin Sun's momentum and flew backward. He had no time to resist or respond. Crack! Lin Sun didn't show any mercy. He lashed out with the iron whip again, which made the practitioner cough blood and faint as if he was electrocuted. Throwing away the iron whip, Lin Sun rushed into the first floor of Vulture House. But he glanced around and found no one. When he climbed to the second floor, he found no one. Lin Sun was stunned, and then he noticed that there was a door leading to a courtyard in the depths of the Vulture House. Overlooking from the second floor, he could have a panoramic view of the whole courtyard. At this time, a group of practitioners stood in the huge courtyard. Chi Zai stood in front of them with a saber on his neck. He then looked at the owner of the saber. She was dressed in plain clothes, and her figure was slender and graceful. She had a pair of straight legs that made her look even taller. She had a head of fine black short hair, and her facial features were beautiful and fair. She was a beautiful woman with impeccable looks, figure, and temperament. Her movements of holding the saber were steady and precise. Her eyebrows were full of calmness and indifference. She was like a lonely iceberg with an inviolable temperament. This person was Drill Master Young Ku. Compared with the time in Bloodthirsty Camp, Young Ku, who took off the military uniform of the Imperial Army, added an indescribable beauty. Her unique calm and cold temperament, coupled with her delicate and beautiful facial features, gave people a strong visual impact. Even Lin Sun couldn't help being slightly stunned when he saw her for the first time. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Young Ku just held the saber and didn't kill him. Unexpectedly, Chi Zai, whose saber was on his neck, was not nervous at all. He was calm and steady. He stared at Young Ku's beautiful face and said with a smile, "I know you've done it, so put away your sword." Young Ku didn't put away her knife. "Do you really think I won't dare to kill you?" Chi Zai burst into laughter with a touch of arrogance on his face. "Of course you dare not. If you kill me, you may escape from here, but the Vulture House and the owner of the Vulture House will definitely pay a bloody price for it. After pausing for a moment, his gaze became scorching and firm as he said, Young Ku, you're actually very clear that it's very easy to kill me, but the consequences aren't simple at all. That's why you've never dared to make a move. Look, this is the power of influence. As he finished speaking, he couldn't help but raise his hand with the intention of stroking Young Ku's face. However, when he saw Young Ku's calm and emotionless eyes, he withdrew his hand in the end. Chise smiled as if he was sure about Young Ku. No matter what, you must go with me today. Otherwise, I will smash the Vulture House and kill the owner of the Vulture House. Young Ku narrowed her eyes and said in a cold voice, How dare you? Chise said with a smile, You can have a try. I guess you don't want to see the owner of the Vulture House die because of you anyway. In this case, what else can you do to struggle? Young Ku fell into silence. Chise became more and more complacent. Like a hunter who was good at playing with women's mind, he said slowly, Young Ku, I really like you. What's wrong with you following me? Now I have the backing of the Qi family, one of the 7 top aristocratic families. If you follow me, you will also become a member of the Qi family. How glorious and glorious it is! Bang! Young Ku shook her wrist and hit Chise's chest with the back of the saber. Chise immediately fell out. Get out! Young Ku spat out a word gently. Chise didn't get angry at all. He got up slowly, dusted his clothes, and walked to Young Ku step by step, saying, Don't make trouble. You dare not kill me. Why struggle? Seeing this, a group of practitioners and attendants nearby all showed a playful face. In their eyes, Young Ku was as unattainable as an iceberg. She could strongly stimulate men's desire to conquer. Now, seeing Chise constantly attacking Young Ku's psychological defense line like an experienced hunter, they felt very satisfied just watching. Young Ku looked at Chise, who was approaching step by step. Her palms and fingers turned white because of the force of holding the saber. Her clear eyes were as calm as water, full of struggle. When he was only 1 foot away from Young Ku, Chise smiled. It was a confident smile. No matter how high this woman's cultivation was, how strong her fighting capacity was, and how cold and aloof her temperament was, she still had to submit to him obediently. This kind of pleasure of conquest stimulated Chise's blood to boil. He couldn't wait to laugh up to the sky. This was power. In front of power, everything was vulnerable to a paper tiger. Young Ku, come with me, Chise said softly. He raised his hand and slowly grabbed Young Ku's arm. Young Ku's body trembled imperceptibly. She seemed to be trying to endure the emotions in her heart. This made Chise more and more complacent. This was the pleasure of conquest. It was an unparalleled enjoyment. Only this woman in front of him could give him such a strong feeling. But at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. If you dare to touch her, I promise to cut off your claws and feed them to the dogs. With the voice, Lin Sun's figure had swept into the courtyard. Who? You're courting death. Reckless fool, how dare you ruin my master's plans? Suddenly, a group of practitioners became restless. They shouted and rushed to Lin Sun. At this moment, when Young Ku saw Lin Sun, she couldn't help being stunned. Why did this little guy come here? Go to hell. In the twinkling of an eye, a group of practitioners' attendants had already rushed to Lin Sun. However, Lin Sun was not in a hurry. He took out 2 meteor's crossbows. After 2 ear-piercing explosions, silver spiritual arrows burst out like a rainstorm, blooming in the crowd like fireworks. Puff, 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 in an instant 7 or 8 practitioners were killed on the spot. Their blood was like a waterfall. Before the end, flowing light saber had been unsheathed. Lin Sun held it in his hand and strode forward. Witnessing all this just now, Lin Sun's lungs were about to explode. Especially when he saw drill master Young Ku, who couldn't be desecrated in his heart, was helpless because of Chise. Lin Sun was full of hatred and sadness. Young Ku was a drill master in the bloodthirsty camp of the Empire. But in the face of a guy with the surname of Qi family, she was in a dilemma. How absurd was this? How ridiculous was this? But Lin soon knew that this was the reality. The reason why young Ku didn't dare to act rashly was that Qi family was behind Qi Zhe. The power of aristocratic families was the cause of all this. Under such circumstances, Lin soon couldn't bear it anymore. He vented the endless hatred in his heart at once and started to fight mercilessly. For a while, the saber light was shooting in the courtyard, crisscrossing like a storm. Most of the practitioners' attendants were in human gang realm, so they couldn't bear such a blow. In the blink of an eye, more than half of them had been killed or injured. "You're courting death." At this moment, Qi Zhe's face darkened. He was completely irritated. His eyes became gloomy and terrible. He was about to succeed, but was suddenly disturbed by others, which made him furious. Boom! He flew up and grabbed fiercely with his palm from afar. An expanse of dazzling and jet-black palm winds flashed out like a black wave that pressed down on the sky and roared, killing the enemy in the air. This was the means of sea spirit realm. But as soon as Qi Zhe made a move, young Ku seemed to have made a decision. She gritted her teeth and jumped up. With a swish, young Ku patted gently with her palm and fingers. The void seemed to collapse, and the power of Qi Zhe's palm was instantly shattered. "Young Ku, you!" Qi Zhe was furious. He couldn't believe that young Ku dared to stop him. Bang! But before he finished his words, young Ku kicked out with a beautiful and neat whip leg. The horrible leg force turned into a shadow and hit Qi Zhe's chest across the air. With a cracking sound, Qi Zhe's chest collapsed and his 7 orifices bled. His whole body was smashed to the ground, making a big pit with smoke and dust splashing. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun had killed the attendants of Qi Zhe. He came over with a bloody saber and said with a smile, "Drill Master Young Ku, this is your style." Young Ku squinted at Lin Sun calmly and said, "You have caused me a big trouble as soon as we met. Think about how to solve it first." "Solve it? Impossible. Unless you kill me right now, none of you can escape." Qi Zhe roared on the ground. His hair was disheveled, his facial features were twisted and livid, and his eyes were bloodshot, full of tyranny and anger. Since he changed his surname to Qi, no one dared to provoke him wherever he went. He had never suffered such a big loss. Young Ku frowned and was about to say something, but Lin Sun said, "Drill Master, let me deal with it. I'll make sure that you don't have to worry about it." As he said, he walked to Qi Zhe with his saber and showed a warm smile. "Don't worry, I won't kill you." Having said that, he raised his saber and cut off Qi Zhe's palms. In an instant, blood burst out like a fountain. Qi Zhe screamed wildly in pain, "You're finished! You're finished! Qi family will never let you go. I swear." Hearing this, young Ku frowned more and more. She was a little worried. Lin Sun squatted down, stared at Qi Zhe's twisted, crazy and livid cheeks, and said with a smile, "You probably don't know that on my way to the Forbidden City, I almost killed more than 2,000 practitioners sent by Qi family and destroyed 6 Ziying battleships of Qi family. By the way, even Qi Tsongfeng ran to Wutsu City to kill me, but I'm still alive." After a pause, Lin Sun asked seriously, "Now, do you think I will still be afraid of the revenge of Qi family?" Chapter 335. Qi Zhe was severely injured by young Ku before and his thoracic bones were broken. Then his hands were cut off by Lin Sun. The heavy blow made him scream in pain and was about to collapse. He cursed crazily in his heart. He hated Lin Sun and young Ku to the extreme. He vowed that if he could survive this time, he would torture them to death. However, when he heard Lin Sun's words, Qi Zhe was like being struck by lightning. The resentment and madness in his heart were replaced by endless panic. Killed more than 2,000 practitioners sent by Qi family? Destroyed 6 Ziying battleships? How the hell was this possible? Qi Zhe didn't believe it at first, but when he heard that even Qi Tsongfeng couldn't kill Lin Sun, he immediately panicked. because he also heard that just yesterday, Qi Tsongfeng went out without authorization. When he wanted to deal with an outsider, he destroyed the arrangement of the clan and was finally put in confinement by the big shots of Qi family. If what Lin Sun said was true, wasn't it the young man in front of him who Qi Tsongfeng wanted to deal with yesterday? Thinking of this, Qi Zhe completely collapsed. His face was bleak and his eyes were empty. He even seemed to forget the injury on his body. No wonder this guy dared to fight unscrupulously. It turned out that he was also a tough guy with a great background. When Young Ko heard what Lin Sun said, she couldn't help but be stunned. How could this guy do so many things before he came to the Forbidden City? Why did Qi family send forces to deal with him? Why did they watch him enter the Forbidden City at the last moment and didn't retaliate? Young Ko realized that there must be a reason for this. But Lin Sun didn't seem to notice the change of Qi Zhe's expression. He still said with a smile, "Of course, you cannot believe it, but it doesn't matter. You just need to know that it's really a simple thing for me to kill you." Qi Zhe looked dull and empty. He was out of his wits. He was disheartened and completely admitted defeat. "Of course, since I said so much, I naturally didn't intend to kill you at this time." But Chen Shi's next words surprised Young Ko. Even Qi Zhe couldn't help but tremble. A look of life flashed in his hollow pupils. But he still didn't believe it. He thought that Lin Sun was deliberately torturing him. He said hoarsely, "Don't play tricks. If you want to kill me, just kill me. If I frown, I will change my surname to yours." Lin Sun smiled slightly. In Qi Zhe's astonished eyes, he began to deal with Qi Zhe's broken hand quickly. First, he helped to stop the bleeding and clean it. Then, he took out the ointment needed for healing and applied it on the wound. Finally, he wrapped the wound with a piece of cloth. Qi Zhe was completely stunned and couldn't speak. "Don't be touched. I'm just trying to save your life," Lin Sun said with a smile, "because I'm really curious about how they will feel when you return to Qi family alive after losing your hands and becoming a cripple. I heard that your surname is given by Qi family? This is a little difficult to handle. If they take back the surname they bestowed upon you and no longer recognize you as a clansman." Before he finished his words, Qi Zhe's head was about to explode, as if he was hit hard by a stick. He finally understood. Lin Sun didn't kill him out of kindness. It was obvious that Lin Sun wanted to make him fall into a miserable situation. Think about it, a useless person was worthless. Even if the Qi family didn't take away his surname, how could he survive in the future? After losing his strength, he was bound to be reduced to a complete clown, struggling at death's door, and being trampled underfoot by countless people. The more he thought about it, the more frightened Qi Zhe was. Who was the young man in front of him? How could he be so vicious? He was a devil. No, even a devil was not as vicious as him. Hearing this, Young Ko couldn't help saying, "Lin Sun, if you offend Qi family, don't worry. If Qi family wants revenge, they can come to me." Lin Sun smiled warmly. He seemed to think of something and reminded Qi Zhe, "Well, I forgot to tell you that if you want to retaliate against me in the future, you can come to Heart Cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats. It's easy to find me." The Mountain of Aristocrats. Heart Cleansing Peak. Qi Zhe's eyes were gloomy. He was so shocked that he wanted to die. It turned out that this guy was also a disciple of an aristocratic family. No. Qi Zhe suddenly remembered that Lin family of Heart Cleansing Peak had declined more than 10 years ago. Now it could barely be regarded as an inferior aristocratic family. Why did he dare to challenge Qi family? Bah! After saying so much, it turns out that you're just a swindler who uses his connections to intimidate others. Qi Zhe sneered. Lin Sun got up and said with a smile, "It's no fun to deceive people like you. Go ahead. You are welcome to take Qi family's people to Heart Cleansing Peak for revenge." Seeing Lin Sun was so confident, Qi Zhe's face changed for a while. Finally, he gritted his teeth, got up despite his injuries and staggered out. Before leaving, he didn't forget to look at Lin Sun and young Ku with resentment. Obviously, this guy still has a glimmer of hope in his heart. He thinks that Qi family will avenge him. Yes, people should find some hope for themselves as long as they are alive. Otherwise, they are no different from being dead. Lin Sun sighed with a smile. Young Ku frowned and glanced at Lin Sun, saying, "Do you still have the mood to sigh for others?" Lin Sun sighed, "I don't itch when I have too many lice, and I don't worry when I have too many debts. Anyway, he dares to harm you, Drillmaster Young Ku, so I dare to make him suffer and pay an unbearable price." Young Ku's clear eyes slightly narrowed. Looking at the handsome young man in front of her, who she hadn't seen for a long time, she couldn't help but have a strange feeling in her heart. Although this boy had changed a lot, he was still good. "I forgot one thing. I should let Qi clean up here before leaving." Lin Sun glanced at the courtyard. The ground was in a mess. Corpses were everywhere and the smell of blood was pungent. "No need to clean up. Do you think it's necessary to stay here after killing so many people of Qi family?" Young Ku was helpless. She turned and walked out. "I'm going to call Vulture. You will leave with us later." "Leave? Where?" Lin Sun was stunned. "How can there be a place for me in the Forbidden City after making such a big storm? I will run away as far as I can," Young Ku said casually. Lin Sun understood in an instant. In the final analysis, Young Ku was still worried about the revenge from Qi family. How valiant Drillmaster Young Ku was when she was in the bloodthirsty camp. But in the Forbidden City, she was pestered by a guy who had changed his surname to Qi. She was tied up. Up to now, she had no choice but to leave the Forbidden City after killing a group of rubbish. This made Lin Sun quite upset in his heart. He finally understood what the so-called aristocratic families meant to ordinary people. Even Young Ku could only swallow her anger, let alone others. If it weren't for the power of Qi family, how could Qi, whose strength was far inferior to Young Ku, be so unscrupulous and lawless? "Drillmaster, I have a way to keep us all in the Forbidden City," Lin Sun said seriously. He had seen that Young Ku was extremely reluctant to leave. Otherwise, she couldn't bear the harassment of Qi for half a year. Sure enough, Young Ku suddenly stopped and looked at Lin Sun. "What's the way? Come back to Heart Cleansing Peak with me." Lin Sun took a deep breath and didn't hide anything. He told her his life experience and the current situation he was facing. "It turns out that you are really the heir of Lin family?" Young Ku couldn't help being stunned after knowing all this. She had also heard of Lin family, but it was too strange for her to imagine that Lin Sun would be related to such an aristocratic family. Lin Sun smiled. "I didn't know it until yesterday." In fact, there was a touch of unspeakable complex emotions in this sentence. Those who weren't involved couldn't understand the bitterness in it. "So you're saying that you came to find me this time to ask for my help?" Young Ku looked at Lin Sun directly. Lin Sun said with a little helplessness, "I can't help it. I just came here and I'm alone. It's impossible for me to fight against those greedy old guys." He took a deep breath and said resolutely, "So, I can only accumulate strength as soon as possible and use any available resources by any means. Otherwise, it's hard to keep my life, let alone keep Heart Cleansing Peak." Young Ku was silent for a moment. She looked at Lin Sun indifferently and said, "If I offend Qi family, I can escape. But if I jump into your fire pit, I may be completely trapped." Lin Sun smiled bitterly. "That's true." Suddenly, he was a little discouraged and realized a problem. Was it really selfish to ask Drillmaster Young Ku to go back to Heart Cleansing Peak with him? It should be known that once Drillmaster Young Ku stood in the same camp with him, the danger she would face was hundreds of times more dangerous than killing Qi. "Come with me first." Young Ku didn't refuse directly. Instead, she took Lin Sun out of Vulture House and walked along the streets for 10 minutes. Finally, she pushed the door into a remote courtyard. The courtyard was quiet and secluded. There was a dense ancient tree in the center. Under the ancient tree, a middle-aged man was sitting in a wheelchair, holding a fat snow-white leopard cat in his arms. The middle-aged man had long gray hair. His face was pale and almost transparent. He seemed to have a stubborn disease, which made him feel extremely weak. But his expression was extremely serene. Under his broad eyebrows, there was a pair of calm eyes, which seemed to be able to see through the vicissitudes of the world. If he hadn't been sitting in a wheelchair with a pale and sickly face, Lin Sun would have suspected that he was a great master who lived in seclusion. "Young Ku, here you are." Seeing Young Ku pushing the door in, the middle-aged man showed a gentle smile. His voice was as low as morning bell and evening drum, which had a unique charm. But when he saw Lin Sun, the middle-aged man was slightly stunned. He raised his eyebrows and said, "This young man is full of killing intent. His clothes are stained with blood. Did he kill someone just now?" Immediately, he realized something. His clear eyes moved to Young Ku and said with a little emotion, "If I'm right, you have completely fallen out with Chi Zhe, haven't you?" Lin Sun was shocked. The middle-aged man had a keen insight. With just a single glance, he was able to determine so many things. If he didn't possess abundant experience and wisdom, it would be impossible for him to accomplish this. Chapter 336. Young Ku nodded and didn't deny it. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Is it because of this young man? You don't have to deny it. In my opinion, even without this young man, this kind of thing will happen sooner or later according to your temperament." Lin Sun was completely shocked this time. He finally understood what was called great wisdom. The middle-aged man had guessed what had happened just now in a few words. It was amazing. Young Ku changed the topic. "Vulture, this is Lin Sun, one of the trainees who successfully graduated from the bloodthirsty camp the year before last." Vulture? It turned out that he was the boss of Vulture House. Lin Sun immediately stepped forward and said, "Nice to meet you, senior." Vulture smiled slightly. "Don't be so polite. You can find this place because Shu Sanqi has given you guidance. In this case, you are not an outsider." Lin Sun immediately sighed with emotion. "Senior, you have a keen eye and can predict things like a god. I have to admire you." Vulture smiled and said, "Give me the hairpin." Lin Sun was stunned and immediately came to his senses. He took out the silver hairpin given to him by Shu Sanqi and handed it to Vulture. Vulture gently stroked the hairpin with a touch of softness in his eyes. After a while, he said, "You must have something to ask of me if you come here with this hairpin. Tell me, how can I help you?" Before Lin Sun opened his mouth, Young Ku stepped forward and whispered Lin's situation to Vulture. After hearing it, Vulture showed a solemn expression and said, "I didn't expect that you are the descendant of Lord Daochen. I'm sorry." Lord Daochen must be Lin Daochen, Lin Sun's great-grandfather. To Lin Sun's surprise, Vulture seemed to admire his great-grandfather so much that he even gave great respect to Lin Sun, a junior. "To tell you the truth, I didn't know my origin until yesterday, so I know nothing about my great-grandfather. I'm sorry to make you laugh." Lin Sun said shamefully. "Well, no more small talk. I already know your story, but I'm not sure whether it's necessary to help you at present." Vulture's eyes were calm with a kind of power to pry into people's hearts. "After all, you also know that if I help you, I will face many terrible dangers. I need you to prove that you can bear this responsibility." "How?" asked Lin Sun. "You are only in the Earthgang realm. If I test your strength, it will be difficult for you. Tell me, if you are in charge of Heart Cleansing Peak, what will you do?" Vulture's tone was gentle, and his eyes were clear. Being stared at by him, Lin Sun felt an inexplicable pressure. Young Ku didn't say anything more at this moment. She just looked at Lin with her clear eyes. She also saw that this was a test. If Lin could pass it, he would get help from Vulture. If he couldn't pass, he could only leave alone. "Let's settle our internal problems first," Lin Sun answered without hesitation. He had thought about this question countless times last night. How do we solve the internal problems? Spirit Vulture continued to ask. His eyes became even calmer, and there was an indescribable dignity that pressed down on one's mind. Lin Sun said in a low voice, "Let's stabilize our foundation first, accumulate strength, and strike later." Vulture shook his head, seemingly dissatisfied, and said, "Too general. It can be seen that you don't have specific plans and arrangements at the moment." Lin Sun was stunned and said, "In my opinion, it's far from the specific layout at present." "Oh," Vulture said with interest, "tell me about it." Lin Sun said quickly, "My only advantage at present is my identity as the lineal heir of Lin family. I can take over heart-cleansing Peak justifiably. On this point, other clansmen of Lin family have lost to me innately." Vulture nodded, justifiably. This is the key point. Lin Sun smiled and continued, "However, my situation is not very optimistic. I have neither money nor manpower. I'm alone, not famous, not strong enough, and my personal prestige is far from convincing." There was a touch of appreciation in Vulture's eyes. From these words, he had already judged that Lin Sun was not a braggart. It was easy to know the enemy, but it was often difficult to know oneself. The most difficult thing for a practitioner to understand was himself. It was extremely rare for Lin Sun to examine and analyze himself and make sober and calm judgments at his age. "So I plan to change myself first before solving the internal problems. When I have the ability, I will plan the overall situation and make a clear plan." Lin Sun took a deep breath and spoke out his real thoughts. Hearing this, Young Ku had been persuaded. He had seen that Lin Sun didn't come to ask for help because of fear. On the contrary, he had his own ideas and plans. "I haven't seen him for a year or two, but he has changed so much. If Chief Shu knows it, he will be very pleased." Young Ku was thoughtful. She knew very well that although Shu Sanchi didn't take much care of Lin Sun in the bloodthirsty camp, Lin Sun was undoubtedly one of the trainees Shu Sanchi appreciated most. Otherwise, Shu Sanchi would not give the silver hairpin to Lin Sun. But to Young Ku's surprise, after hearing Lin Sun's answer, Vulture still didn't seem to be moved. He continued to ask, "Your idea is good. I'm just curious about how you will change yourself. It's not something that can be done in a day and a night." Lin Sun suddenly smiled with a rare look of disdain on his angular and delicate face. He said calmly, "It may be difficult for others to make a change, but I'm different from them. As long as I want to do it, I can definitely let everyone in the Forbidden City know my name within a month." Young Ku's clear eyes were fixed, and a strange look flashed through her eyes. She rarely saw Lin Sun being so confident. People like him would never say such decisive and complacent words easily. It seemed that he must have a lot of trump cards that he hadn't exposed. Almost at the same time, Vulture also smiled and applauded. "Now I can be sure that it doesn't seem to be a bad thing to help you." Lin Sun felt refreshed and said happily, "So you have agreed to help me?" Young Ku said angrily, "As long as you are not stupid, you can already judge it, right? You are so smart. Why are you confused at this time?" Lin Sun was speechless. Of course, he could judge it, but he was too excited in his heart, which made it difficult for him to digest the joy. Originally, he planned to ask Young Ku for help. Who would have thought that he got the help of Vulture by accident? How could Lin Sun not be overjoyed? Vulture seemed to be sick and had no momentum. But he could become Shu Sanchi's friend and was respected by Young Ku. Naturally, he couldn't be an ordinary person. If he and Young Ku could help him, he would undoubtedly have more chips to take charge of Heart-Cleansing Peak. "Now, let me introduce myself again. My code name is Vulture. Like Shu Sanchi, I was one of the trainees of Bloodthirsty Camp." At this time, Vulture looked solemn and said, "Originally, I had the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm. But because of a disaster that year, I was plagued by disease. Now I was no different from a disabled person." Plagued by disease. What kind of disease could actually torture a practitioner in the Tao Insight realm into a cripple? Lin Sun was shocked. When he was about to ask, Vulture waved his hand and said, "Don't ask more about it. I just want to tell you that I can't help you in the battle. The only thing I can do is to help you judge the situation and plan the layout. In short, I can do all the chores for you." Hearing this, Lin Sun was stunned. Young Ku glared at him and reminded him, "Vulture is a tactical master that even Chief Shu has to humbly ask for advice. Even the dean of Green Deer School came to invite him to work in Green Deer School in person, but he refused. You are still standing there stupidly. How stupid you are!" Lin Sun clicked his tongue and quickly bowed to thank her. He was extremely happy. He had expected that Vulture must be extraordinary, but he didn't expect that he was so powerful that Instructor Shu Sanchi had to humbly ask for advice. Even the dean of Green Deer School invited him to work in Green Deer School. That was so awesome. Without any delay, Lin Sun left with young Ku and Vulture at noon and returned to Heart Cleansing Peak in the chariot. On the way, Lin Sun learned that the reason why young Ku stayed in the Forbidden City was to take care of Vulture. According to young Ku, it was because Vulture had saved her life in those years. But when Lin Sun asked about Vulture's disease, young Ku avoided talking about it. She only said that Lin Sun would understand it when he had a chance in the future. This made Lin Sun conclude that Vulture's disease must be extremely difficult to deal with. It was even very likely to be a terminal disease. Otherwise, with his ability, he would have been cured long ago. After returning to Heart Cleansing Peak, Lin Sun told Lin Zhong to arrange a place for young Ku and Vulture to live. He also told Lin Zhong that young Ku and Vulture were the most trustworthy people on Heart Cleansing Peak in addition to him. To Lin Sun's surprise, when Vulture saw Lin Zhong, he seemed to recognize Lin Zhong and said, "May I ask if you are the one who won the 3rd place in the nation test 60 years ago and was known as Bronze Charming? Shen Jingluan?" Lin Zhong was obviously stiff and his expression changed. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Shen Jingluan is dead. There is only one old slave in the world." Vulture narrowed his eyes and didn't ask more. But these words made Lin Sun's heart fluctuate. He didn't expect that the ordinary old man with a stooped body in front of him seemed to have another identity. Bronze Charming. How could ordinary people have such a good reputation? Lin Sun secretly made up his mind that he must figure out this matter when he had a chance. After arranging the residence, Lin Sun invited young Ku and Vulture into his study and began to plan. However, Vulture directly told him that everything was up to Lin Sun. He was only responsible for dealing with all chores. When Lin Sun made a decision, he would put forward corresponding arrangements and wouldn't criticize Lin Sun's decision. And young Ku also said frankly that she was only responsible for doing things. If there was anything, Lin Sun could directly order her to carry it out. Their attitude was so clear that Lin Sun was stunned. He immediately understood that they were not unwilling to help him with all their strength, but silently reminded him that he was the master of everything on Heart Cleansing Peak. If he wanted to be the real successor of Lin family, he must have his own independent ability and not rely too much on others. Otherwise, what was the difference between him and a puppet that could only be manipulated by others? From this moment on, Lin Sun finally realized that his identity had become different from the past. Chapter 337. In the study room on the 2nd floor of Heart Cleansing Hall, the change of his identity made Lin Sun fall into silence. Looking at this handsome teenager, young Ku's eyes flashed with a trace of worry. She couldn't help but look at Vulture. Vulture shook his head slightly, as if saying silently that if he wanted to wear the crown, he must bear the burden. He must adapt to this change of identity. In the past, he might be alone without scruples or burdens. But now, since he wanted to take charge of Heart Cleansing Peak, he must make changes. After a long time, Lin Sun took a deep breath and calmed his deep black eyes. He said, "Thank you for reminding me." Vulture smiled slightly. Young Ku was stunned. In a trance, she seemed to feel that Lin Sun seemed to have changed, but she couldn't know what exactly had changed. I have two things to do at present, Lin Sun said in a low voice. First, recruit soldiers, not servants but real talents. Secondly, I need specific information on the 4 branches of the Lin family. I need to judge what kind of attitude they have towards my return. After that, he looked at Vulture. Vulture thought for a moment, and a light of wisdom surged in his clear eyes. He said calmly, "The second thing is relatively easy to do. You can ask Young Ku to do it." Young Ku nodded. "It's just spying on information. Just leave it to me." Vulture continued, "As for recruiting people, it's a big deal. There are many kinds of talent. I don't know which kind of talent you need." Lin Sun said without hesitation, "It doesn't matter how powerful they are, as long as they are loyal and reliable." Vulture nodded. "That's easy. But before that, you need to solve one more thing." Lin Sun was stunned. "What?" "Money." Lin Sun patted his forehead. He forgot that heart-cleansing Peak was poor now. Where could he recruit people without money? "Leave it to me." Lin Sun stood up and planned to go to keystone business in the Forbidden City. Takes a lot of money to recruit reliable people. Takes at least 50,000 gold coins to do this. And if they join Heart-Cleansing Peak in the future, their food, drink and salary will be borne by you. Vulture reminded him. "Wait and see. I won't let you down." Lin Sun smiled. "Then I'll wait and see." Vulture smiled slightly. He was also a little curious about where Lin Sun would dig up a lot of wealth this time. "Young master, there's something I don't know if I should say." Leaving the study, Lin Sun walked along the mountain road to the foot of the peak. But halfway there, Lin Zhong suddenly spoke with hesitation. "Uncle Zhong, what's wrong?" Lin Sun stopped and looked at Lin Zhong. "If I'm not mistaken, the spirit vulture you invited this time has a rather special identity." Lin Zhong whispered. Lin Sun was surprised. "What's special about it?" Lin Zhong hesitated for a long time before he sighed deeply and said, "Young master, this old servant doesn't dare to confirm it. However, this old servant is able to discern that he has been poisoned by a poison called the Devil Tribulation Powder." "Demonic Calamity Powder?" Lin Sun was surprised. "Yes, this poison is extremely mysterious. It's said that it's a taboo thing in the Empire of the Dark. Once a practitioner below the life-death realm touches it, he will be like suffering from the Devil Tribulation Powder. If it's light, his cultivation will be forbidden and he will never be able to cultivate again. If it's serious, his body and soul will be burnt and he will die." Lin Zhong lowered his voice and explained, "According to my observation, Vulture must have been poisoned." Lin Sun was moved. He never thought that the secret that Young Ku had avoided talking about would be seen through by Lin Zhong at a glance. "Can this poison be detoxified?" Lin Sun asked. Lin Zhong shook his head. "There's no doctor in the whole empire who can detoxify this poison. Because this poison is so overbearing that it's a taboo thing even in the Empire of the Dark. Since Vulture has been poisoned, his identity must be very special." Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't calm down and suddenly asked, "Uncle Zhong, how do you know this poison so well?" Lin Zhong was stunned and said vaguely, "This old servant has heard of it by chance." Lin Sun took a deep look at Lin Zhong and said nothing more. But when he left Heart-Cleansing Peak, he suddenly turned around and asked, "Uncle Zhong, is the bronze charming Xin Jingluan 60 years ago you?" Lin Zhong was stiff all over and seemed to be caught off guard. Lin Sun smiled and waved his hand. "Well, don't say more. It's not too late for you to tell me the answer in person when there's a chance later." Watching Lin Sun leave, Lin Zhong's expression was complicated. After a long time, he sighed and closed the door to the outside world. Then he turned around and left. Keystone business in the Forbidden City was easy to find. It was located in the center of the city. It was the most prosperous place in the Forbidden City. It was impossible for a business or a shop without a strong background to stand here. Here, there was Punglai Restaurant, the first-class drinking and gathering place in the empire. There was Tai Battlefield, the oldest fighting place in the empire. There was Smiles of Beauties, the gold-consuming place that countless practitioners yearned for the most. There was also Keystone Business, which enjoyed the reputation of circulating all the treasures in the world. In the afternoon, a chariot drove into this block and stopped in front of the gate of Keystone Business. When Lin Sun stepped out of the chariot, he saw a magnificent building at first sight. He couldn't help narrowing his eyes. It covered an area of several acres and was hundreds of meters high. Its whole body was like polished crystal, shining with an illusory and mysterious luster in the skylight. If you looked down from the air, you would find that the whole Keystone Business was like a crystal palace salvaged from the bottom of the sea. It was dazzling and colorful, magnificent, luxurious, lofty, illusory. This was the headquarters of Keystone Business, which had the supreme reputation of the first chamber of commerce in the empire. When Lin Sun arrived, Keystone Business was already bustling with noise and excitement. Men and women, old and young, came and went in an endless stream. They were either rich or noble practitioners in luxurious clothes. Lin Sun had seen a lot in the past 2 years. But when he stood in front of the headquarters of Keystone Business and witnessed such a lively scene, he couldn't help sighing with emotion. This was Keystone Business. He didn't know how much effort Golden Hall had made to have such a remarkable achievement. Without hesitation, Lin Sun paced in. The interior of Keystone Business was like a beautiful palace, with a large space of its own. There were a variety of elixirs, rare treasures and spiritual objects everywhere. Thousands of practitioners shuttled back and forth, wandering around and browsing. It didn't seem crowded at all. Although Lin Sun's clothes were ordinary, his temperament was calm. His appearance was not outstanding, but his behavior was unworldly, so he was not ridiculed or neglected. Soon, a beautiful maid came to receive Lin Sun. "I want to see Shiryu." Lin Sun directly stated his purpose. Who?" The beautiful maid was stunned. "The third child of your Keystone Business," Lin Sun explained. The beautiful maid frowned imperceptibly and said in a humble tone, "I'm sorry, child's request is a bit difficult. There are hundreds of guests who want to visit the third child every day. If you don't introduce them, I'm afraid." Before she finished, Lin Sun understood. He took out a token with a smile and handed it over. The beautiful maid took it and looked at it. Her pupils shrank and she said in surprise, "This seems to be the token of the eldest child?" Lin Sun said, "It should be true. But I want to see your third child Shiryu, not the eldest child Shirxuan." The beautiful maid looked at Lin Sun with a touch of enthusiasm and respect in her eyes. She quickly said, "Please wait a moment, child. This matter is of great importance. I need to ask for instructions." Lin Sun nodded. Immediately, the beautiful maid left in a hurry. Not long after, the beautiful maid returned with a middle-aged man who looked like a steward. "I'm Lu Chuan. Nice to meet you, child. May I know your name?" The middle-aged man cupped his hands and asked with a smile. "Lin Sun." Lin Sun introduced himself. "Child Lin, please come in." Lu Chuan cupped his hands and invited Lin Sun to lead the way in person. It didn't take long for Lin Sun to come to an antique, elegant room. At this time, Lu Chuan explained, "Child Lin, my third child is now dealing with some affairs. I will report in person later. Please wait in the elegant room for a while." Lin Sun nodded and said, "Sorry to bother you." Lu Chuan soon left, and Lin Sun pushed the door and walked into the elegant room. To Lin Sun's surprise, there were many figures already waiting in this elegant room. All of them were practitioners, both men and women. When they saw Lin Sun, they all looked at him. When they saw Lin Sun was just a teenager in ordinary clothes, they couldn't help but withdraw their eyes. "Another one comes to visit the third child. Alas, I have been here for a month in a row. I have been waiting here every time. Until now I have not been summoned by the third child. If it goes on like this, I don't know what to do. You have only waited for a month. I have come here as long as I have time in the past 6 months, but I have not been able to see the third child. What's the use of complaining? What kind of person is the third young master? He is one of the 3 sons of Fortune Godshire. He is deeply loved by Fortune Godshire. How can anyone meet such a young noble? Those practitioners started to discuss. Some sighed, some complained, some sneered, and so on. Lin soon realized that the practitioners in this elegant room had the same purpose as him. This made him frown. It seemed that it was not easy to see Shiryu, which was beyond Lin soon's expectation. Well, since I am here, I will wait for a while. If it doesn't work, I will try another business. Lin soon pondered for a while, found an empty seat at random and sat down. He came here to dispose of stolen goods. He intended to dispose of all the spoils seized in the previous battles and exchange them for wealth to prepare for his plan of recruiting. Chapter 338. As time went by, Lin soon gradually became impatient. Someone next to him suddenly laughed and said, "Little guy, if you are impatient, you'd better not wait here. Do you think you can see the third child of Keystone business easily?" Lin soon looked up and saw a middle-aged man with a mustache looking at him with a smile. "Oh, why do you say so?" Lin soon said calmly. "Ho ho, I know you are still too young just from this question. Don't you know who are the people here?" The middle-aged man with a mustache said in an old-fashioned manner, as if he had been through a lot. The implication was that everyone here had a higher status than Lin soon. Even they had to wait here obediently. What right did Lin soon, a young man, have to be impatient? Lin soon laughed at once and didn't want to talk nonsense with him. He was merely waiting to see Shiryu, yet this guy felt so superior that he was giving him pointers? Seeing this, the middle-aged man with a mustache seemed to be irritated by Lin soon's attitude. He snorted and said, "Young man, don't be too arrogant. The world is cruel. If you don't know how to tuck your tail between your legs, you will suffer a big loss sooner or later." Hearing this, other practitioners in the elegant room burst into laughter. Perhaps it was too boring to wait. Seeing the middle-aged man with a mustache reprimanding Lin soon, the newcomer, they all showed a look of amusement. "Hey dude, you can't say that. Aren't all young people like this? They are arrogant and think that the world revolves around them. When they kowtow in front of the reality, they will know how humble and pitiful they are." Someone fanned the flames and made sarcastic remarks. "Hey, you are so bad. Don't beat this little brother any more. Don't you see how pitiful he is? I think he came to see the third child this time, hoping to be appreciated by the third child, so that he can have a meteoric rise and stand out." Bah! Stand out? Such a guy who doesn't even have the patience to wait wants to stand out? What a joke! Those practitioners in the elegant room opened their mouths and made fun of Lin soon unscrupulously. Obviously, they thought that Lin soon's clothes were ordinary and he was young, so he didn't look like a powerful person at all, so their words were full of ridicule and irony. Lin soon sighed in his heart, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. He glanced at the others present and said, "You are so powerful, but you can only wait here obediently like me." His words caused many people's expressions to freeze, and their expressions to turn ugly. But Lin soon still said with a smile, "What's wrong with being young? Why don't you show me a younger one? Don't just take advantage of your seniority. You're not doing well, yet you still want to vent your resentment on others. To put it nicely, you don't know how to respect yourself, but to put it bluntly, you're being cheap." When it came to eloquence, Lin soon had never suffered a loss in his life. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of those practitioners changed. Anger was written all over their faces. "Don't you know how to love yourself? Cheap?" A young boy actually dared to scold them to their faces. "How dare you?" A practitioner pounded the table and stood up, pointing at Lin soon. "Be careful of your words." Lin Sun sat there motionless, but he clicked his tongue and said, "What's the matter? Do you want to fight? I'm just stating a fact, yet you're so angry. You're really a failure. If I were you, I wouldn't say a word and would just kill myself. That way, I can save some cultivation resources for the people of the world." Everyone gasped. This boy's mouth was so mean. You, the practitioner who pounded the table and stood up, was so angry that his face turned red and his eyes almost popped out. With a clang, he pulled out his sword and pointed it at Lin Sun. Lin Sun said indifferently, "Idiot, this is Keystone business. Are you sure you want to fight here? It doesn't matter if you want to die, but if your recklessness hurts others." Speaking of this, the other practitioners' faces changed. Even if they were reluctant, they had to admit that Lin Sun's words were indeed very reasonable. Fight in the headquarters of Keystone business? He must be tired of living. Immediately, a green-robed man persuaded, "My friend, calm down. Don't lower yourself to the same level as a young man. He has no manners. Are you like him?" Hearing this, the practitioner's chest rose and fell sharply. Finally, he held back his anger, withdrew his sword angrily and sat down again, but his face was extremely gloomy. Obviously, he was thinking about how to deal with Lin Sun when he left the headquarters of Keystone business. Lin Sun didn't bother to pay attention to this person. Instead, he looked at the green-robed man and said, "Whose dog is this? Did it run out and bark without feeding?" The green-robed man immediately became furious. "I'm kind enough to persuade you. How dare you call me a dog?" Lin Sun sneered. "No, I'm scolding a dog." The green-robed man was so angry that blue veins appeared on his forehead. He suddenly stood up and shouted, "I'll kill you, you sharp-tongued bastard!" Suddenly, other practitioners panicked and quickly got up to stop him. "Dude, calm down. Didn't you just advise others not to lower themselves to the same level as a young man? Why can't you bear it when it comes to yourself?" The green-robed man was stopped, but Lin Sun still sneered. "Look, this is called a moral dog. He can scold others for not having self-restraint, but he can't bear it when it comes to himself. I think such a hypocrite is even worse than a dog. Let me go. I'm going to kill him. Kill him!" The green-robed man yelled madly with anger. It seemed that he couldn't relieve his hatred if he didn't kill Lin Sun. Those practitioners couldn't help but smile bitterly and stop him. They didn't want to stop Lin Sun, but if Keystone business knew it, they would be affected. What should they do then? At the same time, they finally realized that the young man Lin Sun was simply a thorn. He was completely different from other young people and was not so easy to bully at all. Don't stop him. Let him do it. Lin Sun still sat there and said with a smile, "I'd like to see if this stupid and unrestrained moral dog can bite off a piece of my flesh." Puff! The green-robed man was so angry that he vomited blood directly. It was so annoying. He had never seen such a rude and vicious young man. "Little brother, don't talk so much. It's not good to make enemies casually." "That's right. Let people off when possible." Those practitioners couldn't help but have a headache. "I'm sorry. I'm young and ignorant. I'm proud and arrogant. I don't know how to behave myself, so it doesn't matter if I make enemies." In the past 2 days, Lin Sun faced the situation of internal and external troubles because of the change of his identity. He seemed to be fine on the surface, but he was actually under great pressure. At this time, even a group of practitioners waiting to be summoned by Sure You dared to show off their seniority and sneer at him. How could Lin Sun bear it? Those who knew Lin Sun knew that he was never a man willing to suffer losses. Therefore, in this tit-for-tat war, Lin Sun completely let go of himself and vented all the pressure in his heart. However, after he said these words, it was equivalent to returning all the sarcastic words of those practitioners just now. It was no different from starting a group ridicule. It was full of provocation. All of a sudden, those practitioners were infuriated. This brat simply didn't know what was good for him and was too arrogant. Suddenly, they no longer stopped the green-robed man. They all looked at Lin Sun with a murderous look. It seemed that they would teach Lin Sun a lesson at all costs. Hey, why do you suddenly change your attitude? What's the difference between you guys who don't have a firm stand and pretend to be good guys and fence-sitters? Lin Sun still sat there and spoke rudely. I'll kill you, boy. Finally, the green-robed man made a move. His figure flashed and he slashed at Lin Sun with his sword. Bang! At this time, the door of the elegant room was kicked open from outside, and a handsome young man in a white robe strode in. Oh no! When the green-robed man saw the young man's appearance, his pupils suddenly shrank. He suddenly made a strange cry, and his rushing figure stopped in the middle. His sword was only 3 inches away from the top of Lin Sun's head, but it seemed to be fixed and he dared not move again. The third child. Why was he here? At this time, those practitioners in the elegant room also recognized the identity of the newcomer. They couldn't help but take a breath of cold air, widened their eyes and felt cold all over. The anger in their hearts had long disappeared. Lin Sun still sat there and didn't move at all from beginning to end. He looked calm and indifferent, as if he didn't worry that the sword 3 inches away from the top of his head would cut down. But when he saw Shiryu, who was still dressed in a white robe and extremely elegant, Lin Sun couldn't help but roll his eyes angrily and said, "You enjoyed eavesdropping outside just now, didn't you?" As soon as these words came out, those practitioners couldn't help but tremble in their hearts. Did this boy want to die? How dare he laugh at the third child Shiryu? Instead of getting angry, Shiryu shrugged his shoulders and laughed. I just want to see whether you have changed after 2 years of not seeing each other. I never thought that you haven't changed, but your mouth has become insidious and mean. At this time, those practitioners were all like being struck by lightning. They completely realized that the cunning and vicious boy had known the third child Shiryu for a long time. And judging from the situation, it seemed that the friendship between the two was not shallow. When they thought that they looked down on Lin Sun, ridiculed him, thought that he didn't know the rules and didn't even have the patience to wait, they felt uncomfortable all over, as if they had lifted a stone to drop on their own feet. If they had known Shiryu for a long time, who would have the patience to wait? Damn it! This was a big misunderstanding. These practitioners wanted to cry but had no tears. They could only blame themselves for judging a person by his appearance and mistaking the friend of the third child Shiryu as a young man who could be bullied. The strangest thing was that the green-robed man was obviously frightened by this scene. He still kept the action of rushing forward and slashing, motionless like a clay statue, which looked extremely funny. Dude, it must be very uncomfortable to keep this posture. I can understand your mood very much, but I still have to say, don't be a moral dog in the future, or you may be killed at any time. Lin Sun sighed. After listening to Lin Sun's words, the green-robed man nodded his head like pounding garlic, with a look of awe and trepidation. This time, even Lin Sun was not in the mood to care about it. He kindly reminded him, "Take back the sword, you will look very embarrassed like this. P.S. I've seen a lot of moral dogs on Weibo these days. If they didn't agree with each other, they would preach the so-called bullsh *t. If they dared to refute, they would immediately get angry. What a group of low people. This chapter is dedicated to moral dogs." Chapter 339. In a luxurious palace, Shiryu sat on the praying mat made from the fur of the purple cloud bear, and said with some surprise, "I did not expect that, with your temperament, you would actually take the initiative to look for me. This makes me feel somewhat overwhelmed by the favor." "I don't see you being surprised at all." Lin looked at Shiryu opposite him. It had only been 2 years since they last met, but this guy had already reached Heaven Gang realm, and his breath had become more restrained and calm. Sure enough, not only Lin Sun was climbing on the road of cultivation, but also his companions in those years were making great progress. Lin Sun vaguely remembered that when Shiryu broke through in gang-producing lake, he condensed the first-class pond of spiritual power tidal Milky Way. At that time, there were thousands of silver waves surging and rolling in the sky, which was quite spectacular. It could be inferred that sure you could reach Heavengang realm now, which was also reasonable. Beside the table, two beautiful girls with snow-white skin and light gauze skirts were kneeling on the ground. One was cooking tea with a teapot in her slender hands, and the other was preparing fruits and snacks for them with a smile on her face. The tea was the top-grade tea from the Imperial Palace, flowing light dancing gold. Pieces of light cyan tea were like flowing lights and dancing gold in the boiling spiritual spring, which was pleasing to the eye. The taste was cool and refreshing, and the fragrance was ethereal, mellow but not strong. This cup of tea alone was priceless, because such good tea was a royal item, which couldn't be bought in the outside world at all. Looking at the plates of fruits and snacks, there were fallen star fruits, picked from the bitter and cold land in the extreme north, fierce green peaches from the bottom of the volcano. There were even several kinds of delicacies, which Lin Sun had never seen or heard of. It could be seen how luxurious Shi Yu's cultivation life was as the third son of fortune god Shi of Keystone Business was. The tea and snacks he enjoyed were not affordable by ordinary rich children. Of course, this was to entertain Lin Sun. If it were others, sure you would not bother to entertain them with these good things. Since I left the bloodthirsty camp, I have been thinking about how far you and Ning Meng would cultivate when we meet again. Sure you sighed with emotion while drinking tea. Now I'm relieved. At least you're still lower than me in cultivation, as you were in the bloodthirsty camp. As for Ning Meng, that idiot, I think it is impossible for him to catch up with me. Lin Sun said with a smile, "It doesn't matter how high your cultivation is. What do you think your chances of winning are?" Sure you laughed. "I'm not afraid to tell you that I've been honing my martial arts in the past 2 years. If you still think that you can suppress me with your fighting capacity as you did in the bloodthirsty camp, you underestimate me too much." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. "Oh, do you want to have a try?" Sure you was stunned. "Now?" Lin Sun said, "Yes." Sure you stared at Lin for a while and suddenly shook his head. "No, how can we fight when we meet? I'm not a fool like Ning Meng. Come on, have some tea. Don't talk about these things that spoil the fun." Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but smile. He didn't force Shi Yu. This was Shi Yu's character. His mind was clear and exquisite, and he wouldn't show his strength easily. Just like his fighting style, once he made a move, it would be a thunderous and fatal blow. "Tell me, why do you come to me with my elder brother's token?" Shi Yu asked curiously. Lin Sun immediately explained the process of meeting Shi Xuan. Shi Yu suddenly understood, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Although I don't like my elder brother, I have to admit that he has always been a good judge of character." Lin Sun smiled. "Your elder brother is really a great man." Shi Yu waved his hand at once. "Forget about him. It's not easy for us to meet each other this time. We should drink to our heart's content. Qingxue Lianyue, go to prepare dishes with wine. Remember to take out my treasured dragon blood wine." "Yes." The two beautiful girls smiled faintly and left after receiving the order. Lin Sun shook his head and said, "This time I come for something. It's not too late to drink this wine later." Shi Yu was stunned. "Is it urgent?" Lin Sun nodded. Shi Yu immediately made a decision. "Then let's solve the problem first." He also knew Lin Sun's temperament. He knew that Lin Sun would never refuse his invitation under normal circumstances. The reason why Lin Sun did so must be that he encountered a difficult problem. "I want to sell a batch of materials from you." Lin Sun didn't hesitate and directly stated his purpose. "This batch of materials is a little special. They are the spoils of war I seized. If I sell them to others, I'm afraid that they won't dare to accept them. Secondly, I don't want to let others take advantage of them." Shi Yu asked with interest, "What materials? Is the quantity large?" Lin Sun glanced around and immediately got up. He took out the small summer ring and waved his sleeve gently. With a bang, all kinds of spiritual weapons, equipment and short crossbows appeared and piled up like a mountain. The quantity was so large that it occupied a small half of the hall. For a while, spiritual light and treasure chi were released, which made the hall look like a real treasure mountain. Shiryu took a breath of cold air, got up suddenly, stepped forward and looked at it for a moment. He was surprised. Lin Sun, did you rob an army? Lin Sun said casually, almost. Thinking about it, the 3,000 elite practitioners sent by Qi family were indeed no different from an army of practitioners. These spoils of war were all seized from those practitioners. There were thousands of spiritual weapons, hundreds of sets of equipment and about 700 short crossbows. All of them were intact. Those that were damaged were either abandoned by Lin Sun or consumed in the battle. Shiryu also found the strangeness of this batch of spoils of war at this time. He narrowed his eyes slightly and said, Qi family? Lin Sun nodded. Shiryu looked at Lin Sun strangely. You are so bold to rob Qi family. He was really shocked. Those spoils of war were all high quality and branded with the unique standard of Qi family. They couldn't be bought in the market at all. Lin Sun seized such a huge batch of spoils of war. It could be imagined how many practitioners of Qi family he had killed for this. Lin Sun said, Well, can you accept them? Shiryu said unhappily, Are you kidding me? There is nothing in the world that Keystone Business can't accept. Do you think these spoils of war or your life is more important? He looked straight at Lin Sun with a serious look. Are you sure you know the fate of becoming enemies with Qi family? Obviously, Shiryu misunderstood. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun gave a brief account of what had happened after he left Mist City, including his life experience and his current situation. He didn't try to conceal anything. After listening to all this, Shiryu was stunned. Sometimes he was shocked, sometimes he was indignant, sometimes he was confused, and sometimes he sighed. The amount of information revealed by Lin Sun was too much for Shiryu to digest completely for a while. It wasn't until a long time that Shiryu came to his senses. The first sentence he said was, Fuck, I know you are not an ordinary person at all. Lin Sun was helpless. Would you believe me if I said I would rather be an ordinary person? Shiryu patted Lin Sun on the shoulder and sighed with emotion. I didn't expect that your life was even more bitter than mine. Alas, no wonder I felt congenial to you at the first sight of you in Bloodthirsty Camp. Lin Sun said angrily, Your life is bitter? Don't joke, okay? If you talk nonsense again, I'll leave. Shiryu hurriedly said, I also want to relieve your mood. I'm worried that you are under too much pressure. He thought for a moment and said, Wait for me. I'll find some old men to help you estimate the value of this batch of spoils. After that, he turned around and left in a hurry. Not long after, Shiryu brought 3 or 4 old men who were dressed differently into the hall. These are the appraisers of Keystone Business. I believe they can give you a satisfactory return. Shiryu introduced them with a smile. Third child, I can accurately judge the value of these materials at a glance. You invited us all here. Don't you just want to identify these things? A gray-robed old man glanced at the mountains of materials and said with slight dissatisfaction. Obviously, in his eyes, although the number of materials was amazing, they were not good treasures at all and not worth a lot of effort. Shiryu was stunned and said with a smile, Old Chiu, please calm down. I'm too worried about my friend's affairs. If there are any omissions, please forgive me. Needless to say, these old men must have a very high status in Keystone Business, so Shiryu had to show respect to them. Hey, it turns out to be the friend of third child. This time, should we also offer a friend price? Another short and fat old man said with a smirk. Shiryu's face was slightly frowning. The gray-robed old man called Old Chiu waved his hand and said, Well, since it's the business of third child's friend, it's worth our help. The stout old man said casually, According to my judgment, The market purchase price of these treasures is 74,200 gold coins, which can only be higher. Another old man said, "These treasures come from Chi family. They are no different from stolen goods. It's difficult to sell them. They need to be specially processed. If they are converted, they can be sold for 60,000 gold coins at most." Another old man added, "Since they are the friend of third child, even if we don't make money, we can only offer 64,000 gold coins." After that, all the old men looked at Shiryu. Obviously, the final result was decided by Shiryu. Shiryu looked a little gloomy at the moment. These old men's businesslike appearance made him quite annoyed. But this was the rule of Keystone business. Even if he was the son of fortune god Shur, he couldn't go beyond it. Lin Sun didn't have a chance to speak. But he could see that although these appraisers respected Shiryu very much, they didn't have much deference. Respect and deference seemed to be similar, but in fact, they represented two completely different attitudes. Finally, Shiryu sighed. "That's it." Lin Sun suddenly said, "Wait." Chapter 340. Old Xiao, who was tall and thin, said in a deep voice, "Are you not satisfied with the price offered by Keystone Business?" Lin Sun shook his head, "No." But before he explained, Old Xiao's face darkened. "Young man, I have to remind you that this batch of treasures comes from Chi family. They are no different from stolen goods. If you are not a friend of the third child, it is very good that you can get half of the price, let alone 64,000 gold coins." Old Xiao said seriously. There was a trace of anger in his words. He seemed to think that Lin Sun didn't know what was good for him. Shiryu couldn't help frowning and said angrily, "Old Xiao, I didn't invite you here to teach my friend a lesson. Child Xiu, please calm down. I'm just kind enough to remind you." Old Xiao said calmly. Shiryu was about to say something, but he was stopped by Lin Sun with a smile. "You misunderstood me. I'm not dissatisfied with the price. In my opinion, friends and business are two different things and have nothing to do with each other. So, please take back the friendship price, and just follow the market price." The appraisers with extremely high status and seniority were stunned, and they seemed to be in slight disbelief. Even Shiryu couldn't help being stunned and angry. He thought that Lin Sun had been irritated by these old men, which made Shiryu a little embarrassed. His friend came here, but he was bullied. If this was spread out, how could Shiryu show his face in the future? "It's good for young people to have a temper, but you are a little impulsive. Don't you make us look too ruthless? How will child Xiu think of us?" Old Xiao snorted coldly. He thought that Lin Sun was taking a step back in order to win Shiryu's sympathy and embarrass them, which was sinister. Shiryu was already a little mad. He grabbed Lin Sun's arm and took him into a quiet room on the side of the hall. He whispered, "Lin Sun, don't care about those old men. Although they are annoying, they are also capable people. In the headquarters of Keystone Business, they only listen to my father. Even I dare not fight against them." In the end, he couldn't help laughing at himself. These are the truth. Although I am the son of fortune god Shur, I am very popular. In fact, in Keystone Business, I often have to do things that I can't control. As he spoke, he sighed again. "I originally thought that those fellows would give me face and let you get as many benefits as possible. I never thought that things would turn out like this because of these old men. Damn it, how can I raise my head in front of you in the future?" These words were both persuasion, self-mockery, and catharsis. It could be seen that Shiryu, the third child of Keystone Business, was not as carefree as he seemed. He also had his own troubles and worries. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but say, "Think about me, you should feel very lucky. At least you deserve to be the third young master, while I, the heir of Lin family, am all alone." Chiu said. The so-called happiness came from such a comparison. Shiryu was startled for a moment, and then he laughed unkindly. "Now that you mention it, I really feel a lot happier. If you have any unhappy things in the future, you can tell us and make everyone happy." Lin Sun couldn't help rolling his eyes. Get out of here. Sure, you laughed for a while and stopped laughing. He said, when we go out, you should listen to me and accept the price first. I'll find a chance to help you fix these old men in the future. His voice carried a wisp of coldness. As the third son of Fortune Godshire, he would inherit the business of Keystone business in the future. So whether he stood up for Lin Sun or not, he had to find a chance to beat those disobedient people. This was the way he had to take when he wanted to take power in the future. If he couldn't make those old men surrender, the so-called power was just a joke. Lin Sun smiled. If you believe me, listen to me this time. Then he walked out of the quiet room with Shiryu. The elders were still there, but there was a hint of impatience in their expressions. Originally, they had only come together because of Shiryu. Otherwise, why would people of their statuses waste time on a young man? This was the headquarters of Keystone business. Every day, countless high-ranking officials and nobles would line up to receive them. Seniors, Shiryu and I have negotiated that these treasures will be sold at the market price. Lin Sun said directly and neatly. Those old men were all suspicious and looked at Shiryu. Shiryu thought for a while and finally gritted his teeth. Listen to him. Old Xiu said calmly, in that case, let's do it. But let's put it bluntly. Young man, we have given you face. If you regret later, don't blame us for it. Lin Sun smiled, of course. Seeing Lin Sun's reaction was so calm, these old men were a little confused. Then they shook their heads and didn't want to think more about it. He was just a young man. Even if he was a friend of the third young master, he couldn't affect their status in Keystone business at all. Third young master, since things have been settled, we will leave now. Old Xiu cupped his hands and said. But Lin Sun said with a smile, Seniors, please wait a moment. I have some other treasures to sell. I need you to check them one by one and give me a fair market price. Shiryu narrowed his eyes at once, knowing that Lin Sun had begun to fight back. But he couldn't help wondering what treasures Lin Sun was so confident that he could teach those old men a lesson. It should be known that this was the headquarters of Keystone business, which circulated rare treasures all over the world and gathered all the treasures in the world. As the most senior and supreme great appraisers in the headquarters of Keystone business, what treasures hadn't those old men seen? Therefore, if Lin Sun wanted to teach them a lesson in this way, he needed to show them amazing treasures. Otherwise, he would be ridiculed and attacked by those appraisers. Hey, it seems that this young man is a little unconvinced. Is this a test of our ability to appraise treasures? Haha, I haven't encountered such a thing for a long time. Those old men were stunned at first, and then they all laughed disapprovingly. Old Xiu frowned and said, Young man, we have important things to do. We can't waste too much time. If you want to appraise treasures, please find someone else. Obviously, he also thought that Lin Sun seemed to deliberately provoke them. He didn't care about such a childish trick. Not only would it waste time, but it would also embarrass Lin Sun. In this case, the third young master would blame them for bullying his friend again. After saying that, he turned around and left. Just halfway, there was a sudden exclamation behind him. Is this treasure? 9 twists red core iron? It's impossible. 9 twists red core iron only exists in the depths of the distant Soul Oblivion Sea. It belongs to the legendary seabed treasure. It is mysterious and rare. In recent hundreds of years, such a treasure has not been found in the whole empire. But the appearance, breadth, color, and power fluctuations of this thing are indeed very similar to the legendary 9 twists red core iron. Let me have another look. Old Xiu was stunned. 9 twists red core iron? What a joke. Lin Sun was so young and he came to the third young master for help. How could it be possible for him to have such a rare treasure? But after thinking about it, he couldn't help but turn around. Suddenly, he saw his companions gathered around Lin Sun with different expressions as if they had found a rare treasure. Looking at Lin Sun's hand, he was holding a treasure that was as thick as a child's arm and twisted like a vine. It was about 1 foot long and covered with dark blue spiritual light. It was filled with an ethereal breath like the rushing sea and cold snow. With just a glance, old Xiao couldn't help but shrink his eyes and feel shocked. This seemed to be the legendary 9 twists red core iron? This was a great treasure. It hadn't appeared for hundreds of years. It was no different from extinction. Its value was immeasurable. As an appraiser, when he encountered such a legendary treasure, he felt like a lecher seeing a charming and peerless beauty. He couldn't wait to pounce on her. But in the end, old Xiao still resisted this strong impulse. Before, he claimed that he had something important to do and didn't want to waste time, so he asked Lin Sun to find someone else. If he turned back now, wouldn't it be equal to slapping his own face? Humph. Maybe it's not necessarily 9 twists red core iron. It's not too late to make a decision after those companions appraise it. Old Xiao snorted in his heart, but his eyes still uncontrollably drifted to Lin Sun's hand. It seemed that he was extremely contradictory and struggling in his heart. All this was seen by Shiryu. He couldn't help sighing in his heart. Lin Sun's means were really like listening to thunder in silence. He didn't talk nonsense at all. A treasure had turned the situation around. However, Shiryu was also a little shocked by the treasure Lin Sun took out. 9 twists red core iron was a kind of unparalleled spiritual material. As far as he knew, if 9 twists red core iron could be used as a spiritual material to cast the spiritual furnace of a large warship, it would absolutely play an incredible role. Shiryu vaguely remembered that his father, Fortune God Shi, once occasionally said that the most valuable thing on the Ziwei Emperor's ship, the Ziwei Emperor, was the spiritual furnace made of 9 twists red core iron and dozens of spiritual materials. It was rumored that the Ziwei Emperor ship could break the void and soar above the sky. Even the overmatches of reincarnation developing realm couldn't shake it. If the treasure in Lin Sun's hand was really a complete piece of 9 twists red core iron, thinking of this, Shiryu couldn't help but tremble in his heart. He could be sure that in the headquarter of Keystone business, this treasure belonged to the top of the world. But where on earth did Lin Sun get this thing? This treasure only existed in the depths of the distant Soul Oblivion Sea. It was almost a legend. Chapter 341. The elders could not be blamed for losing their composure. Even if it were the practitioners in the Tao Insight realm or the Reincarnation Development realm who could be called the giants of the world, they would also be envious of this item. Lin Sun didn't laugh at these old men. Through their reaction, Lin Sun realized that the value of these treasures obtained from the ancient relics in the Soul Oblivion Sea was absolutely beyond imagination. Just like at this moment, just a piece of 9 twists red core iron made these great appraisers of Keystone business lose their composure, which was completely beyond Lin's expectation. In Lin's view, 9 twists red core iron could only be regarded as an ordinary thing among all the treasures he obtained. Of course, this was relative. After a while, an old man breathed out a long breath and said with burning eyes, "There is no doubt that this is definitely 9 twists red core iron." Other appraisers also nodded as if they had just woken up from a dream. Shiryu immediately smiled and was very excited in his heart. Seeing this in the distance, old Xiao couldn't help but look complicated. If Lin Sun had taken out this thing earlier, how could so many things have happened? "Young friend, are you sure you want to sell this treasure?" someone asked. Those old men all looked at Lin Sun. Their attitude had become completely different from before, with a trace of respect and curiosity. 9 twists red core iron. This treasure alone was enough to make them look at Lin Sun with new eyes. But they were also curious about where Lin Sun, such a young man, got this treasure. It was incredible. "Yes, but please be patient. This 9 twists red core iron is just one of the treasures I want to sell." Lin Sun turned his palm and put away 9 twists red core iron. Then he took out a spiritual flower with a verdant stem and 36 leaves. The leaves were thick and tender green, with veins like obscure secret lines. They were shining like green clouds hanging on the stem and branches. The spiritual flower was as clear as the color of the cyan world. It was in bud, and its petals were illusory, gushing with essence clouds and exuding a strong and cold air. In a trance, people only felt like drinking fairy spring, relaxed and happy, as if they were going to fly away with the wind. It was indescribably wonderful. What a magical spirit! What is this? 36 leaves, veins like secret lines, extremely clear and empty. Could it be the one with so many divine beauties of heaven and earth? Spirit flower of purity and void. This is definitely the spirit flower of purity and nihility, which has been extinct in the Imperium for a long time and is known as the king of spiritual medicines. The old men spoke with trembling voices. Their pupils dilated as they stared fixedly at the wondrous spiritual herb in Lin Sun's hand. Their faces were filled with excitement and shock. How many years had it been since they'd seen this flower, and they'd originally thought it had been obliterated in the world. Who would have imagined that it would silently appear before their eyes at this moment? This made them feel as if they were dreaming. Spirit flower of purity and emptiness, sure you hissed and sucked in a breath of cold air. This was a rare treasure that could make a reincarnation developing realm expert go crazy. In terms of value, it was even more valuable than 9 twists red core iron, because possessing it was sufficient to allow a reincarnation developing realm cultivator to comprehend the profound essence of nothingness and smoothly condense a soul origin that belonged to him. This old Xiao, who was struggling in his heart because of 9 twists red core iron, felt as if he was struck by lightning when he saw a spirit flower of purity and nihility with 36 leaves. The last trace of perseverance in his heart collapsed, and he couldn't help rushing forward to observe it closely. His eyes were shining as if he was obsessed with it. He murmured, "Incredible, incredible! This spirit flower of purity and nihility is at least 1,000 years old, and its quality is almost perfect. It's a masterpiece of God." The scene at this time was very interesting. Lin Sun didn't say a word, but the 2 spiritual objects he took out one after another changed the situation on the scene. The great appraisers, who had maintained their identities, lost their previous arrogance and prejudice, but became obsessed, excited, and shocked. They fell down under the charm of the spiritual objects. This dramatic change made Sure Yu stunned for a while, and then he couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. Since he met Lin Sun in the bloodthirsty camp, he had never found anything difficult for Lin Sun, including now. Ordinary people couldn't make these senior great appraisers of the headquarters of Keystone Business lose their composure frequently. Some people would say that this was the credit of the 2 spiritual objects, but don't forget that these spiritual objects also came from Lin Sun. Not convinced? He could let other Xiozhi take out 2 similar spiritual items and try it out. Seniors, have you seen it clearly? Lin Sun, who had been silent for a long time, finally opened his mouth and put away the spirit flower of purity and nihility in his hand. Suddenly, those old men woke up with different expressions as if waking up from a dream. "I'm sure that this is indeed a spirit flower of purity and nihility." Old Xiao coughed and said in a low voice. Other old men looked at each other. After they came to their senses, they all felt a little uncomfortable when facing Lin Sun again. Before, they regarded Lin Sun as a young man who came to Keystone Business to take advantage of Sure Yu's name, and their attitude was very rude and arrogant. But now, after seeing the 2 spiritual objects in Lin Sun's hands, they all realized that they had made a mistake this time. But because of their face, they couldn't put down their pride to apologize to a junior, which made the atmosphere in the hall a little quiet for a while. However, this was the result Lin Sun wanted. He smiled slightly and said, "Since it has been determined, why don't you make a price?" "Well, let's sell it at the market price." Hearing the 3 words, market price, those old men's cheeks twitched imperceptibly, as if they had been slapped in the face and felt a burning pain. Are you sure that you really want to sell these 2 treasures? Old Xiao took a deep breath, endured his inner unhappiness, and asked in a deep voice. I'm sure. Lin Sun said casually. If Keystone Business is not willing to accept it, I can go to other business. As soon as Lin Sun said this, an old man was anxious. Young friend, don't get me wrong. Because these 2 spiritual objects are too precious and rare, we are not sure whether you really want to sell them. Yes. Others also spoke one after another. What a joke. If they could accept these 2 treasures, it would bring immeasurable benefits to both Keystone Business and themselves. Under such circumstances, how could they watch helplessly as such a treasure slipped away from right under their noses? Third child, what do you think? Old Xiao looked at Shi Yu and asked in a gentle and friendly voice. Obviously, he wanted Shi Yu to help persuade Lin Sun. Shi Yu was so happy in his heart, but he shook his head and said, No, I just gave him a friend price, but he didn't want it. As a friend, how can I persuade him? Hearing the 3 words, friend price, those old men looked uncomfortable again. They were old and sophisticated. How could they not see that Shi Yu and Lin Sun seemed to be retaliating against them? But there was nothing they could do. In order to keep the 2 treasures, they could only pinch their noses and bear it. Well, seniors, please give me a price. If I think it's reasonable, I will sell these 2 treasures immediately. If not, Lin Sun pondered and said, Seniors, please don't embarrass me for the sake of Shi Yu. Those old men always felt that every word Lin Sun said at this moment seemed to be ridiculing and sarcastic to them, which made them feel bitter in their hearts. They regretted offending the young man in front of them just now, which made the situation suddenly become like this. This was retribution in one's lifetime. What made them most depressed was that these 2 treasures were too rare and precious, so it was not easy to give a price. To put it simply, if the news was released to the outside world that Keystone Business would sell these 2 treasures, even if the price was high, there would inevitably be many practitioners rushing to fight for them. Well, can we discuss it in detail, my little friend? Old Xiao hesitated. Others nodded. If the price was low, Lin Sun would not be satisfied, and Keystone Business might miss these 2 treasures. But if the price was too high, the interests of Keystone Business would be damaged. Therefore, they must come up with a way to satisfy Lin Sun and let Keystone Business profit from it. Seniors, please feel free. Lin Sun nodded and agreed quite generously. Immediately, those old men left in a hurry and found a quiet room to discuss. Great! At this time, Shi Yu, who had been watching the fun, couldn't help laughing. He was in high spirits, and had the pleasure of letting out a long breath of resentment. It's actually a small trick. It can only suppress their arrogance and make them change their attitude. Lin Sun said casually. He didn't feel anything. Haha, that's enough. Shi Yu suddenly remembered something and reminded Lin Sun, don't embarrass them too much later. Lin Sun said with a smile, of course. Then, he whispered to Shi Yu, I might as well tell you that no matter what price they offer, I won't agree. Shi Yu was stunned and thought, that's right. Who would be willing to sell such treasures for money? Lin Sun shook his head, you misunderstood. It's not the problem of their price, but I have already decided to sell these treasures by auction. Shi Yu suddenly understood, your method is really good, but if you do this, it will make Keystone Business suffer a lot. Lin Sun said angrily, are you sure Keystone Business is yours? I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by doing this. I can help myself and give you a chance to prove yourself. Shi Yu was clear-minded and understood in an instant. He was surprised and said, you want me to help you deal with this matter? Lin Sun nodded. Yes, no matter the auction price is high or low, at least all this is your credit. Shi Yu pondered for a while and looked at Lin Sun with a complicated look, saying, you are too shrewd. Lin Sun rolled his eyes, cut the crap. Do you agree or not? Shi Yu said without hesitation, yes, kidding. Only an idiot will refuse such an opportunity. Lin Sun nodded, took out 9 twists red core iron and spirit flower of purity and nihility, and handed them to Shiryu. After thinking about it, he picked out 3 or 4 precious spiritual materials that he didn't need and threw them to Shiryu. It's a rare opportunity. Auction them all. Shiryu had fallen into a state of sluggishness at this time. He never expected that Lin Sun just casually took out 3 or 4 treasures that were not inferior to 9 twists red core iron and spirit flower of purity and nihility. It was crazy. P.S. As of now, the promise at the beginning of the month has been fulfilled. The total number of words has exceeded 1 million, and the monthly update volume has exceeded 200,000. In addition, there is an important thing to inform you. Goldfish will go on a long journey tomorrow and the day after tomorrow to attend a meeting of the Provincial Writers Association. She will not be at home, but she will stay up all night to prepare the manuscripts and try to keep updating. The updates on August 1st and 2nd will be arranged at 12 noon on time. I hope you can vote more monthly. Goldfish guarantees that the updates in August will be more than in July. Chapter 342. Green Evil Dragon Sleeping Wood. Tie-by Meteorite Iron. Red Shadow Grass with tear stains. Every time he recognized the origin of a treasure, Shiryu was shocked in his heart. He was a little confused until he finished reading them. He had seen unparalleled treasures before, but it was the first time for him to see so many unparalleled treasures in front of him. Among them, there were several peerless treasures that had almost disappeared for a long time. For a moment, Shiryu had a strong impulse to take away Lin Sun's storage ring. He couldn't imagine how Lin Sun got these treasures. Did he not only rob the practitioners of Qi family but also a treasure house of immortals? It was incredible. If the practitioners outside knew that Shiryu, the third son of fortune god Shur and the famous third child of Keystone business, was shocked by some treasures at this moment, no one knew what they would think of him. In the end, Shiryu refrained from asking about the origin of these treasures. Everyone had his own secret. It was not appropriate to ask rashly. Even if they were the best friends, some bottom lines could not be violated. But then again, the best friends often wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Don't be silly. Give me the money for the spoils first. I have to hurry back to solve some things. Lin Sun didn't dare to stay any longer. There were a lot of things waiting for him to deal with in Heart-Cleansing Peak. Well, are you going to leave like this? Shiryu was stunned. These treasures are all yours. Don't you worry that I will take them for myself? I believe you. Lin Sun patted Shiryu on the shoulder with a smile. Shiryu said angrily, I can't keep my bottom line in front of treasures. Lin Sun sighed and said, just these treasures can make you unable to keep your bottom line. Then you are too cheap. Of course, I'm really blind to have a friend like you who is obsessed with money. Get out. Shiryu scolded with a smile. Having said that, he still took Lin Sun out of the hall and ordered the attendants to give 64,000 gold coins to Lin Sun. This was the money for the first batch of materials. As for the treasures left by Lin Sun, he would know how much they were sold after the auction. In this regard, Lin Sun didn't worry about Shiryu's character at all. Lin left in a hurry. When Shiryu returned to the hall, he was still in a trance. It had only been a year or two since they last met, but Lin Sun's change was beyond his imagination. Not only did Lin Sun become the sole heir of Lin family, but he also possessed many rare treasures that could drive people crazy. This was incredible. What did this guy experience after he left the bloodthirsty camp? Shiryu fell into deep thought. Very soon, Shiryu was awakened by the sound of footsteps. It was those appraisers walking out of the quiet room. Obviously, they had reached a conclusion, and there was a hint of excitement and expectation on their faces. But when they found that Lin Sun was gone, they were all stunned. Third young master, where is your friend? Old Xiu's face changed slightly and he said nervously. He thought Lin Sun was impatient and gave up the deal. He's gone. Shiryu answered casually. What? He actually left? Is it because of our bad attitude before that he is unwilling to trade with us? The expressions of those old men changed, and they seemed to be hit hard. 9 twists red core iron and spirit flower of purity and nihility slipped away under their eyelids, which made them very upset. Seeing these old men were so depressed, sure you couldn't bear to give them a blow, so he stopped while he was ahead. Who said he was unwilling to trade? What did you say, third young master? Those old men were refreshed, and a glimmer of hope rekindled in their eyes. He has handed over the treasures to me and asked me to auction all the treasures on his behalf, so you don't have to worry about the price anymore. Sure, you said casually. Bidding. Old Xiao and others were stunned, and then they smiled happily. Whether it was bidding or direct quotation, as long as these 2 treasures were sold through the channel of Keystone business, it was enough. Don't be too happy too early. I need you to help me identify some treasures. Of course, these treasures are left by my friend, and they will be auctioned together. Sure, you coughed dryly. His words immediately attracted the eyes of those old men. There were more treasures? They showed interest and their eyes were burning. Soon, sure, you took out 4 or 5 treasures, such as green evil dragon wood, Taibai meteorite iron, red shadow grass with tear stain. My God, is this true? Taibai meteorite iron. I thought I would never have a chance to see this thing in my life. Quick, pinch me. Am I dreaming? It's red shadow grass with tear stain, which is difficult to find even in the royal treasury. This, when seeing these unparalleled treasures in front of them, those old men were completely crazy. Their eyes were shining, their lips were trembling, and they shouted loudly. They didn't care about their manners at all, which made them look a little funny. But sure, you didn't laugh. When he first saw these treasures, he also lost his manners, so he understood the feelings of these old men very well. Third young master, you have made a great contribution this time. Old Xiao was excited and couldn't hide his joy. Yes, with these treasures, we can hold an auction of the highest standard. At that time, with these unparalleled treasures, we can make the whole Forbidden City into a sensation and promote the reputation of Keystone business to a higher level. Congratulations, third young master. Congratulations, third young master. Third young master's friend is simply a lucky star. If we have a chance to meet him again, we will definitely offer a humble apology to him. Listening to the excited and joyful words of those old men, sure you couldn't help laughing. This time, Lin Sun did him a big favor. At the thought of this, he suddenly realized one thing. Now Lin Sun was in an extremely dangerous situation. Should he do something for Lin Sun? Sure, you immediately took a deep breath and said, Everyone, this matter is of great importance. I'm going to see my father. Those old men all nodded repeatedly. Indeed, it was necessary to report to Fortune Godshire with so many treasures at once. But Sure Yu was different from what they thought. The reason why he went to see his father was to find an opportunity to help Lin Sun with his father's wisdom. The reason why he was so cautious was that Lin Sun's current situation was extremely complicated, involving many huge forces in the Forbidden City. If he didn't act cautiously, he would not only not be able to help Lin Sun, but also cause a lot of trouble for Keystone business. That was not the result Sure Yu wanted to see. In the back kitchen of Savory House, it was smoky and there were many sundries piled up. A skinny man with no expression was sitting on a small wooden stool, sharpening a sharp knife, making a clanking sound. On the other side there was a large, crude wooden table. On the wooden table, there was a whole cow that had been roasted until it was dripping with oil. An extremely fat middle-aged man, wearing only a thin moon-white mandarin jacket, was waving a pair of bright machetes to cut off pieces of beef, which was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Swish, swish, swish. His speed of cutting meat was extremely fast, but his speed of eating meat was even more amazing. His mouth was like a bottomless pit. After more than 10 breaths, there was only a clean cow skeleton left on the wooden table. The fat middle-aged man smacked his lips, put down the machete in his hand, and sighed with emotion. I have to say that only the whole roasted cow cooked by you, Zhu Laosan, suits my taste best in the whole empire. There are not many snow-hoof magic cows left. The situation in the Empire of the Dark has been tense in recent years. There is a possibility of another war at any time. If you want to continue to eat, you'd better send someone to the dark abyss to catch more before the war starts. The skinny middle-aged man who was sharpening the machete said dully. His face was expressionless, as if he had no emotional fluctuations, which made him look very cold. Don't worry, it's still early for the war. It will take at least another 3 or 5 years. The fat middle-aged man took out a snow-white towel, wiped his mouth, leaned lazily on the back of the chair, sighed comfortably and said, Zhu Laosan, it's too useless for you to hide here every day. Do you really plan to spend your whole life here? Don't worry about my business, and I don't care about yours, Zhu Laosan said in a muffled voice. His palms and fingers were thick, and the blue veins on the back of his hands were protruding like earthworms. But the strength of sharpening the machete was very gentle and delicate, like a silkworm spinning silk in spring. The fat middle-aged man smiled and said no more. At this time, a young man in a white robe with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes hurried in, sat directly opposite to the fat middle-aged man, and said with a smile, Father, you are really good at hiding. I have been looking for you for a long time. The young man in a white robe was sure you. There was no doubt that the huge fat middle-aged man was the real ruler of Keystone business, a legendary figure in the world. Fortune God sure. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, no one could imagine how such a figure, who was known as the fortune god in the empire, could hide in a smoky back kitchen and eat heartily. Say it quickly. Fortune God sure squinted at Shiryu. Shiryu said directly, My friend is in trouble, so I want to ask you to give me an idea. Fortune God sure snorted and muttered, It must be a big trouble. Otherwise, you would have taken action long ago. How could you think of me? Tell me what the trouble is. Shiryu immediately told him about Lin's situation. After listening, Fortune God sure still leaned lazily on the back of the chair, but his eyes were filled with a strange color. It's really a big trouble. I can't help you. After a while, Fortune God sure said casually. Shiryu was stunned and gritted his teeth. Father, if you don't help me, I will do it myself. Don't blame me if Keystone business is implicated. Fortune God sure was annoyed and said, You have learned to threaten me. You are so lawless. Sure you didn't give in at all. I have no choice. I can't watch my friend in trouble. At this time, Fortune God sure suddenly laughed, turned his head to look at Zhu Laosan not far away, and said, Look, this is my son. He doesn't even listen to me for his friend. Zhu Laosan said expressionlessly, Your son is better than you. Fortune God sure was stunned. After a while, he smiled and said to Shiryu, I don't help because someone is more suitable than me. Who? Shiryu was refreshed. Chapter 343. Him? Shiryu looked at Zhu Laosan and found that Zhu Laosan was strong and burly with messy hair and beard. His exposed bronze skin was like a rock which was full of explosive power. His expression was cold and expressionless, and his entire person had an unshakable aura that was as heavy as a mountain. Clang! At this time, Zhu Laosan put away the sharp knife, got up and strode out. Zhu Laosan, are you going to leave without saying a word? Fortune God sure shouted. But Zhu Laosan said without turning his head, If I don't die, I will continue to roast the cow for you when I come back. Fortune God sure immediately smiled. Then I will wait for you to come back. Shiryu was anxious, Father. Didn't you say that he could help Lin Sun? Why did you just watch him go? Fortune God sure scolded. Idiot, didn't you see that he took the initiative to find your friend? Shiryu was confused. What's going on? Fortune God sure got up, moved his fat and huge body, and walked towards the outside, but his expression was a little strange. Is this something that has been predestined for a long time? Isn't it too coincidental? Fortune God Sure sighed with emotion. Immediately, he explained the reason to Sure Yu. It turned out that Lin Sun's great-grandfather, Lin Daochen, was the savior of Zhu Laosan. Hundreds of years ago, Zhu Laosan was still a recruit who had just entered the battlefield. He was ambushed by the dark aliens and fell into a desperate situation. At that time, Lin Daochen didn't specifically save him. He just happened to pass by and killed those dark aliens, which indirectly saved Zhu Laosan's life. But anyway, this matter was remembered by Zhu Laosan. He swore that if he had the chance to return from the battlefield alive in this life, he must repay Lin Daochen for saving his life. Unfortunately, when Zhu Laosan returned from the battlefield, Lin Daochen had died, which was no less than a bolt from the blue for Zhu Laosan. For many years after that, Zhu Laosan had been staying on the frontier battlefield. He lived by fighting and became more and more powerful. Later, when Zhu Laosan learned that Lin Daochen's lineage was murdered more than 10 years ago, he returned to the Forbidden City angrily. But when he returned, the enemy had already disappeared, leaving him with no place to vent his hatred. In the end, he was disheartened and stayed in this savory house, becoming a chef who concealed his identity. After knowing all this, Sure Yu suddenly understood and couldn't help but admire Zhu Laosan in his heart. This Zhu Laosan is a real man who keeps his words and promises. Fortune God Sure nodded. At that time, Zhu Laosan was just a small soldier. I'm afraid that even Daochen Gong didn't know that there would be such a small soldier who vowed to repay his inadvertent life-saving grace. But Zhu Laosan did it. Fortune God Sure sighed and said, when he learned about the bloody things that happened in Duke Daochen's family more than 10 years ago, Zhu Laosan couldn't eat or sleep in peace. He fell into self-blame and couldn't extricate himself. Such a sentimental and righteous person is rare in the world today. Sure Yu couldn't help being moved. He didn't expect that even his father had such a high evaluation of Zhu Laosan. Immediately, he said in a daze, "So, it's really a coincidence that I came here this time? This is the principle of cause and effect in the unseen world. The cause that Daochen Gong unintentionally planted in the past has borne fruit today. 'Cause an effect, it's really wonderful." Fortune God Sure sighed with emotion. Sure Yu also felt that this matter was full of a coincidence. If he hadn't brought the news of Lin Sun, the great-grandson of Duke Daochen, Zhu Laosan would stay in this savory house for the rest of his life and fall into self-blame. If it hadn't been for Duke Daochen's inadvertent kindness, Zhu Laosan might not have been able to live until now. All this was indeed like a drink and a peck. Was it predetermined? See Spirit Realm, 300 years of life. Tao Insight Realm, 600 years of life. Reincarnation Developing Realm, 900 years of life. Now Zhu Laosan has only a few years of life left in Tao Insight Realm. If he can repay the kindness this time and untie the knot in his heart, he may have a chance to reach Reincarnation Developing Realm and prolong his life. Fortune God Sure seemed to have thought of something and murmured, "Otherwise, this action of repaying his kindness will be the last moment of his cultivation career. By the way, Father, I have one more thing to discuss with you," Sure Yu suddenly said. Fortune God Sure woke up from his meditation and said impatiently, "If it's a trouble, don't mention it. I'm very upset." Sure Yu said with a smile, "This is a great thing." As he said, he described the things that he would bid for those peerless treasures on behalf of Lin Sun. "Well done. Only now do I realize that what I like the most is earning money. Only when I think about earning money will I become happy." Fortune God Sure suddenly laughed and patted Sure Yu on the shoulder. The latter staggered and almost fell to the ground. Sure Yu grinned and rubbed his shoulder. He was also very happy. It was not so easy to get his father's approval and appreciation. Heart-cleansing peak. "Vulture, here are 60,000 gold coins." As soon as he returned, Lin Sun gave a large sum of money to Vulture, and then gave the remaining 4,000 gold coins to Lin Zhong for a rainy day. That was to say, The money he earned from selling a large number of spoils flowed out of his pocket in a twinkling of an eye. 60,000 gold coins. It's enough to recruit a few decent experts. Vulture didn't ask where the money came from. He was only responsible for doing things. But I want to remind you first. Lin Sun was stunned. Go ahead. This is just the beginning. There will only be more money to spend in the future. If the financial resources are insufficient, the previous efforts are doomed to be in vain. Vulture said softly. Lin Sun felt the pressure. At present, heart-cleansing Peak was poor. The industry owned by Lin family was either looted by foreign enemies or divided by 4 collateral branches. Lin Sun was left with an empty shell. In this case, if he wanted to take charge of heart-cleansing Peak and reverse the situation, he couldn't do it without money. Fortunately, he had handed a batch of rare treasures to Shiryu for auction. He believed that it would not be long before he brought a huge fortune to himself. So at present, at least in the near future, Lin Sun didn't have to worry about financial resources. However, selling treasures was not a long-term solution after all. If heart-cleansing Peak wanted to restore its former glory, the key problem was how to solve the internal and external troubles. As long as all the collateral branches bowed their heads and spat out all the industries they divided in those years, heart-cleansing Peak could recover to a certain extent. Further, if the industry and wealth looted by foreign enemies could be recaptured, heart-cleansing Peak would rise again soon. Of course, all this had to be done step by step and was full of danger. It was not easy to do. Don't worry. Leave the money to me. Lin Sun took a deep breath. Although the pressure was great, the responsibility was heavy, and the situation was dangerous, he had to bear it. Then I'm relieved. Vulture nodded. Mr. Vulture, are you going to Lane of 10,000 homes to recruit people? Suddenly, Lin Zhong, who had been on standby, asked. Lane of 10,000 homes. That was the place where talents gathered in the Forbidden City. Countless practitioners who came to the Forbidden City from all over the world to make a living would look for things there. There were all kinds of talents. Most of them came from poor families. There were some powerful figures. But if you wanted them to work, you had to pay a high price. In the Forbidden City, most of the powerful forces would choose to go to Lane of 10,000 homes when they recruited servants and guards. Vulture shook his head with a smile. No. He didn't explain, but he had a kind of certainty. Obviously, he had a plan in mind. Before long, Vulture left heart-cleansing Peak with young Ku, who had just returned. Lin Sun walked into the study on the second floor of heart-cleansing Peak. On the desk, there was a thick account book, which counted all the items looted in heart-cleansing Peak that year. They were roughly divided into cultivation classics, elixirs, spiritual medicines, spiritual treasures, rare treasures, and so on. Under each category, the name and number of each kind of looted item were listed in detail. After reading them one by one, Lin Sun couldn't help but breathe a long sigh of relief. Even though he had known that all the valuable treasures on heart-cleansing Peak were robbed after the bloody incident, Lin Sun still felt an irrepressible hatred in his heart when he saw the specific number and list of these treasures. Sooner or later, I will settle this score with you one by one, clearly and clearly. A ruthless light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. He carefully put away the account book, leaned his body on the soft back of the chair, narrowed his eyes slightly, and was in a daze. It was only a day since he entered the Forbidden City, but too many things had happened, which made Lin Sun feel tired. He knew his origin, set foot on heart-cleansing Peak, taught a group of collateral children who drank and had fun in heart-cleansing Peak, analyzed the situation. Then he went to Vulture House to invite young Ku and Vulture back next. He arranged young Ku to spy on the intelligence of the 4 collateral clansmen of Lin family and arranged Vulture to recruit soldiers. Because of the lack of financial resources, he had to go to Keystone Business to sell the spoils. Sitting in the study now, Lin Sun couldn't help thinking of all the things that happened in this short day. It was really not easy to be the heir of Lin family, Shaking his head, Lin Sun calmed down. Weakness was the most terrible emotion. He would never allow himself to show any weakness before he reversed the situation. When I left Heart Cleansing Peak this morning, Lin Ingzhen of Westbrook Lin was humiliated by me. I think this news should have spread to the 4 collateral branches. How will they react to my strong attitude? Lin Sun was lost in thought. In Lin Sun's view, the biggest internal trouble of Lin family now was the 4 collateral branches. If he couldn't solve this problem, he would not be the heir of Lin family after all. At this time, there was a knock on the door outside the study. Young master, a practitioner who called himself Zhu Laosan, came to visit and said that he came to repay your kindness. Lin Zhong's voice also sounded. Chapter 344. Heart Cleansing Hall. Zhu Laosan stood there like a majestic mountain, casting a long shadow on the ground. His beard and hair were messy like weeds, his face was dark, and his bronzed muscles were bulging like rock. His hands were as big as palm leaf fans, and the blue veins on the back of his hands were bulging. Standing there, he gave people an unshakable momentum. At the first sight of Zhu Laosan, Lin Sun was shocked and felt an indescribable sense of oppression. It seemed that Zhu Laosan was a god of war who had just walked out of the battlefield of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The unique sense of killing and blood had penetrated into his bones and could not be concealed at all. Very strong. He was at least at the level of Tao Insight Realm. Lin Sun was surprised. He didn't expect that the great man who came in the name of repaying should be such a powerful master. While Lin Sun was looking at Zhu Laosan, the latter also raised his head and glanced at Lin Sun. His face was expressionless and his eyes were calm, but just a glance made Lin Sun feel a tingling feeling of being cut by a sharp edge. Fortunately, Zhu Laosan withdrew his gaze in a moment and said in a muffled voice, "My name is Zhu Laosan. 576 years ago, on the battlefield of the Empire's 19th attack on the Dark Army, I was in a desperate situation. Fortunately, I was saved by Lord Daochen's assistant." The dull voice resounded through the empty hall. "I swore that I would repay Lord Daochen for saving my life in this life." Speaking of this, he suddenly stopped and fell into silence. Did he finish? Lin Sun was stunned. After waiting for a while, seeing that Zhu Laosan didn't intend to continue, Lin Sun couldn't help saying, "My great-grandfather has already died." "You are late," Zhu Laosan said in a deep voice. "Not late. Since you are Lord Daochen's grandson, I should regard you as my benefactor to repay you for saving my life." To be honest, it was undoubtedly a happy thing for Lin Sun, who was extremely short of manpower now, to have such a master come to repay his kindness. But he didn't dare to promise without authorization. "More than 10 years ago, there was a bloody incident in my family, which led to the murder of my grandfather, father and other relatives. If you want to repay, why didn't you show up at that time?" Lin Sun looked straight at Zhu Laosan with deep eyes. At this moment, Lin Sun was keenly aware that there was an imperceptible fluctuation in Zhu Laosan's eyes, which seemed to be pain and self-blame. But immediately, Zhu Laosan calmed down and said, "When I hurried back to the Forbidden City from the battlefield, the murderer had disappeared." He didn't explain further. He was like an emotionless rock, making it impossible for others to pry into his inner emotions and thoughts. However, Lin Sun suddenly understood. After the bloody event, everyone thought that all the clansmen of Lin's branch had died out. In addition, the enemy came from the mysterious heaven-reaching sword sect. Under such circumstances, even if Zhu Laosan wanted to repay the kindness, he couldn't do it at all. "I just returned to Heart Cleansing Peak yesterday. How did you determine my identity?" Lin Sun suddenly asked. Zhu Laosan said concisely, "I heard it from the son of fortune god Sure." "Sure you?" Lin Sun was stunned and his doubts faded a lot. He had made up his mind to find a chance to ask Shiryu about Zhu Laosan's origin. Lin Sun pondered, "How are you going to repay the kindness?" Zhu Laosan said, "I only know how to fight. You can regard me as your protector until I feel that I have repaid the kindness. I will leave. Lin Sun nodded and said, What do you need me to prepare for you? Zhu Laosan said, A spoonful of food and drink is enough. I will not interfere in your life. I will only appear when you need me. Lin Sun finally dared to confirm that this man really came to repay the kindness. He couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. Although his great-grandfather, whom he had never met, had died long ago, the blessings and influence he left in those years could continue to this day. It could be imagined how high the prestige and reputation of his great-grandfather was at that time. Zhu Laosan was a strange man. Just because of a kindness in those years, he could remember it to this day. If it were other practitioners, who would be so persistent as him? This was the real hero. Keep your promises and keep your words. Lin Zhong sent Zhu Laosan out of the hall. It wasn't long before he returned and reported, Young master, I have arranged a residence for him. Lin Sun said thoughtfully, Grandad Zhong, what do you think of this man? Lin Zhong thought for a moment and said quickly, This man has the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm. He is full of iron-blooded killing intent. He should be a powerful figure who has been fighting on the battlefield all year round. Judging from his words and deeds, there should be no big problem. Lin Sun asked suddenly, Can you defeat him? Lin Zhong was stunned and seemed to be caught off guard by the question. Then he said embarrassedly, Young master, I'm just an old servant. I can't compete with that strong man. Lin Sun said with a smile, Grandad Zhong, even I can't see through the strength of Zhu Laosan, but you can judge his strength and accurately say that he is a strong practitioner of Tao Insight Realm. It's a little strange. Lin Zhong said with a wry smile, Young master, you must have misunderstood me. I have followed the Patriarch for many years and have seen many practitioners in the Tao Insight Realm. Under the influence of what I see and hear, it is easy for me to do this. Lin Sun sighed, Well, I won't ask you any more. You can leave now. Lin Zhong wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he held back and turned away. Tan Hua Xin Jingluan, the Tan Hua of the nation test 60 years ago. Even Vulture has heard of him. It can be imagined how dazzling he was. If Grandad Zhong was really Xin Jingluan, how could he become like this? Lin Sun thought as he walked up to the third floor of the hall. The third floor of Heart Cleansing Hall was a secret practice room specially set for the Patriarch of Lin family. In the past, this place was like a forbidden area, and only the Patriarch could enjoy it. But now, after mastering Heart Cleansing Seal, Lin Sun could also get in and out of it. When Lin Sun arrived here, an ancient bronze gate stood in front of him. The surface of the bronze gate was imprinted with dense cloud patterns, which looked ancient and vicissitudes. It was the first time for Lin Sun to come here since he entered Heart Cleansing Peak. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun took out Heart Cleansing Seal and ran the gang spirit in his body. A purple light suddenly shot out of the seal and poured into the bronze gate. Suddenly, there were obscure and vast waves on the surface of the bronze gate, as if it woke up from silence. Immediately, the gate opened silently in front of Lin Sun. Outside Heart Cleansing Hall, Lin Zhong was clearing the weeds on the side of the mountain road. When the bronze gate opened, his stooped body was slightly stiff. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Heart Cleansing Hall in the distance. There was a hint of anticipation on his face, as well as a hint of hesitation. It was an indescribably complicated feeling. After a while, Lin Zhong sighed and took back his eyes. It was a secret practice room, but in fact, it was no different from a temporary palace. The moment the bronze gate was opened, Lin Sun saw a magnificent, solemn and even somewhat empty palace in front of him. It was empty inside. Walking in it, Lin Sun felt small. Behind him, the bronze gate closed silently. For a moment, it seemed that he was isolated from the world. Is this the place where only the Patriarch of Lin family can enter? Lin Sun looked around and couldn't find any furnishings. There was only a futon in the center of the hall. This made Lin Sun suspect that after the bloody incident more than 10 years ago, even the secret room used for practice had been ransacked. Otherwise, how could it be so shabby? Thinking about it, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing in his heart. What was the use of thinking about it now? He went straight to the futon in the center of the hall and sat down cross-legged. Although there were a lot of things to do, Lin Sun didn't dare to slack off in practice. He had decided that as long as he had free time, he would use it all for practice. In order to speed up the promotion of practice, he had made enough preparations. Lin Sun took a deep breath and took out a snow-white ginseng with many fine roots. It was half a foot long, as thick as a candle, and looked like a sleeping baby. It exuded a refreshing and strong fragrance of medicine. Just a sniff of it made Lin Sun's spirit lively and his soul comfortable. This was snow ginseng. It was a kind of holy medicine that could make practitioners crazy. It had an immeasurable magical effect on refining and improving the realm. It was priceless. Generally speaking, only practitioners with high cultivation could fully refine and make use of such peerless spiritual medicine. After all, an ordinary cultivator would not be able to withstand the enormous power contained in the elixir if they swallowed it. Lin Sun also knew this, but he didn't intend to swallow the whole snow ginseng at once. He first prepared a mutton fat jade bottle, and then carefully tore off a fibrous root of snow ginseng. Then he immediately put it into the bottle and sealed it firmly. This was also to prevent the medicinal power of snow ginseng from escaping. Finally, Lin Sun put a strand of the root into his mouth. Although he had been extremely careful, he still underestimated the terrible medicinal power of snow ginseng. When a strand of root went into his stomach, Lin Sun only felt a bang, as if there was a sudden explosion of molten lava in his body. In a moment, the rolling hot medicinal power was like a runaway horse, rampaging in the meridians and acupoints of his body, producing a burning and tingling feeling. Lin Sun's skin turned red instantly. It seemed that he had swallowed a stove and was about to burn. Wisps of white mist rose around his body. The medicinal power was so terrible. Just a strand of root made Lin Sun's body feel unbearable and almost explode. Everyone knew that his foundation in Earthgang Realm was so strong that he could easily crush Heavengang Realm over matches. But now, even his incomparably strong foundation seemed to be faintly unable to bear it. It was too late to regret. Lin Sun made a muffled groan, gritted his teeth, and ran Nature Insight and Spirit Devour Scripture with all his strength. At the same time, the windstorm millstone in his body rotated wildly. Chapter 345. Not knowing how long it took, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. Whoosh, he exhaled a breath of air, and the airflow transformed into a spirit light that was like a waterfall that shot out violently, and it was like a sharp blade that tore through space with a swish. Finally, it hit the wall dozens of meters away with a bang, making a loud noise. His internal strength was bursting, and his breath was like a blade. This was a sign that he was about to step into Heavengang Realm. Lin Sun was stunned at once. Even he couldn't believe that his cultivation suddenly soared to the mastery of Earthgang Realm after refining a wisp of the root of snow ginseng. He could break through the realm at any time. Lin Sun still didn't believe it and concentrated on feeling. The gang spirit in his body was like a magnificent ocean, surging and surging, and the breath it emitted was dense, pure and unparalleled majestic. The originally illusory sky-blue glow of the spiritual power had become reserved, like a simple green jade, crystal clear and flawless. Earthgang Realm was the process of connecting with the earth. What one comprehended was the momentum of the earth, condensed the chi of the earth, and took the earth as the carrier. It was like duckweed taking root, no longer drifting with the current. At this time, all the signs in his body showed on the surface that Lin Sun had reached the mastery of Earthgang Realm. It turned out to be true. Lin Sun was in a trance. He was shocked by the huge power contained in snow ginseng. Just a wisp of root could have such terrible power. If he swallowed all of it, Lin Sun shook his head immediately. The power contained in refining this wisp of root almost made his body unable to bear it. If he dared to swallow the whole snow ginseng, he would definitely explode and die. Not bad. My foundation hasn't become unstable due to my cultivation advancing too quickly, and the strength of my body has obviously increased by a level. Lin Sun carefully felt the change of his strength and couldn't help showing a satisfied smile. As early as when he broke through the Earthgang realm, he had already defeated those Heavengang realm practitioners of Qi family. Now that he had reached the mastery of Earthgang realm, how much transformation would he have in the battle? Inexplicably, Lin Sun thought of Shai Yutong, the young sword king, and the scene when Shai Yutong put his sword on his throat. He thought of Qi Tsongfeng, who had the bloodline of Purple Sea Golden Lotus in Qi family. He thought of the scene that Qi Tsongfeng came out of nowhere and wanted to kill him. All of a sudden, the joy in Lin's heart disappeared. Still not enough. Perhaps in Gang Spirit Realm, he could hardly find an opponent, but in the face of Sea Spirit Realm, he was much weaker than him. For a moment, Lin Sun's heart was burning with an unyielding fighting spirit. A man lived for a breath, and a Buddha fought for a stick of incense. Wasn't cultivation the same? Contending with heaven, contending with earth, contending with man, contending with oneself. If one didn't strive, one's Tao heart would lose its drive to advance courageously, and one was bound to be unable to achieve anything great in cultivation. One day, all of you will have a taste of being conquered by me. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and his deep and clear black eyes were full of firmness. This was the change in the Tao heart during cultivation. A single thought, a single decision, a single memory, or a single tribulation would affect the Tao heart. The transformation of one's state of mind was undoubtedly the most miraculous. Lin Sun's eyes inadvertently glanced at the roof where he was sitting. He didn't know when there was a round and mysterious black light emerging on the roof. It was like a painting deduced by the light. In the painting, there were dense and obscure strange veins, floating there quietly, looking extremely mysterious. Lin Sun's mind was immediately attracted. He was sure that this picturesque light didn't exist at all when he entered this cultivation chamber. That was to say, this strange scene quietly appeared when he was concentrating on cultivation. Lin Sun got up from the futon and frowned. This was a forbidden place for cultivation that only the patriarch of Lin family could enter, but there was only one futon in this seemingly mysterious place, which seemed a little strange. After all, with the foundation of Lin family as an upper-class aristocratic force, how could they not build a cultivation place like a paradise? At this time, a round and black light emerged on the roof, which undoubtedly proved that there must be a mystery hidden in this cultivation chamber that he didn't know. After thinking for a long time, Lin Sun seemed to make a decision. His figure flashed, and he rose into the air, reaching out his hand to grasp the round and black light. But before Lin got close, the black spiritual light suddenly disappeared, as if it was startled. But Lin Sun was keenly aware that a small black shadow fell down from the air, at the same time the black light disappeared. Almost subconsciously, Lin Sun reached out his hand and grabbed it. His body also floated to the ground at this time. There was no other way. He hadn't reached Sea Spirit Realm, so he could only move in the air. Opening his palm, a black ring appeared in his palm. It was extremely ordinary, like a circle of black iron hoop. It was light and weightless in his hand. To Lin Sun's disappointment, this ring was not a storage treasure, so it had no spirituality. Lin Sun raised his head and looked at the roof again, but found nothing there. The round and black light that appeared just now seemed to evaporate from the world, leaving no trace. Strange, Lin Sun played with the ring and walked out of the cultivation chamber. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked out of the bronze door, he saw Lin Zhong already waiting there. Lin Sun couldn't help being stunned. "Grandad Zhong, what's the matter?" Lin Zhong just wanted to say something, but when he glimpsed the black ring in Lin Sun's hand, His pupils dilated immediately, and a touch of unconcealable excitement appeared on his face. He said in a trembling voice, "The ancestral ring." It was indeed not snatched away back then, but it was hidden here by Lord Patriarch. His voice was full of unconcealable joy, and he almost burst into tears. Obviously, the so-called ancestral ring had a very special meaning for Lin Zhong, which made him unable to control his emotions at first sight. Seeing this, Lin soon vaguely understood that this seemingly ordinary ring without spirituality should be an item handed down by the ancestors of Lin family, and it had secrets that outsiders couldn't know. When Lin Zhong regained his excitement, Lin soon said, "Grandad Zhong, tell me about this ring." "Young master, you don't know that this ring is called Chaos. It's a treasure handed down by the ancestors of Lin family. Only the heir of the lineal bloodline of Lin family has the qualification to control it. Other collateral clansmen, even outsiders, can't have this thing. Because this ring is extremely special, only the blood power of the lineal heir of Lin family can awaken it and make it surrender." With a hint of reminiscence in his voice, Lin Zhong told him about the origin of the universe ring. "I've been guarding Heart Cleansing Peak these years. In fact, what I really guard is the forbidden area on the 3rd floor of Heart Cleansing Hall. This is because this old servant knows that even if the leader and the others perish, this universe ring will definitely not be lost. Chaos Ring. It was handed down by the ancestors of Lin family. Only the heir of the lineal bloodline had the qualification to control it." Knowing all this, Lin soon couldn't help being shocked. He had guessed that the origin of this ring was extraordinary, but he didn't expect that it was the treasure of the ancestors of Lin family. "Young master, if you get it, your qualification as the heir of Lin family will be recognized by the ancestors of Lin family. In the future, no one dares to make irresponsible remarks about your identity." Lin Zhong looked at Lin Sun excitedly. "It turns out to be a kind of recognition of my identity." Thinking of this, Lin Sun's excitement faded a lot. So what if he was recognized? The 4 collateral clansmen would not bow their heads to him just because of his identity. "Young master, you misunderstood," Lin Zhong said seriously. "Strictly speaking, this ring is the real foundation of Lin family's survival to this day." Lin Sun was stiff all over and said with emotion, "What do you mean?" Lin Zhong took a deep breath and said word by word, "Because with the power of this ring, we can get the supreme ancient book of Lin family, Chaos Taoist scripture. This ancient book is also the inherited secret method that only the patriarch of Lin family is qualified to practice." Lin Sun was completely stunned and his mood fluctuated. It turned out that there was such a shocking secret hidden in this ring. If it weren't for Lin Zhong's reminder, he would never know this in his life. "Young master, our Lin family was one of the 8 top aristocratic families 500 years ago. The reason why we can stand side by side with the other 7 top aristocratic families is because of the Chaos Taoist scripture." Lin Zhong couldn't help sighing when he said this. It's a pity that the patriarch couldn't understand the real mystery of the Chaos Taoist scripture in his whole life, so he was stuck in the reincarnation development realm and couldn't become a real king of life and death realm. The original owner was the most promising candidate to master the Chaos Taoist scripture because of his superior talent and excellent comprehension. But he was unfortunately killed in the bloody event more than 10 years ago. Lin Zhong's voice was low and his expression was indescribably lonely and melancholy. Lin soon realized that he didn't take over an empty heart-cleansing peak, but the greatest wealth left by the ancestor, the Chaos Taoist scripture. "Grandad Zhong, how can I activate the power of the Chaos Ring? Why can't I feel anything special at all?" Lin Sun suddenly asked. "Young master, I once heard from the patriarch that only when you step into Sea Spirit Realm can you touch the mystery hidden in the Chaos Ring." Lin Zhong explained in a low voice. "I see." Lin Sun was suddenly enlightened. After thinking for a while, he carefully put away the Oblivion Ring. It was the most precious treasure of the clan. When he reached Sea Spirit Realm, he would have the opportunity to peek at the mystery of Oblivion Taoist scripture. At this time, Lin Zhong seemed to think of something. He patted his forehead and said, "Young master, I was too excited just now and forgot one thing." Lin Sun was stunned. "What's wrong?" A haze appeared on Lin Zhong's face. "The 4 branches of Lin family will each send a representative to come to Heart Cleansing Peak to see you at noon today." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and sneered. "I just returned to Heart Cleansing Peak for 2 days. They can't sit still?"